Not to the public. You don't count. I've seen you before. I've seen him the other time.
Who would do that?
Calls meeting to order. Roll call.
Commissioner Peterson.
Present.
Commissioner Ramos.
Here.
Commissioner Ryan. Present. Commissioner Ricketts.
Here.
Commissioner Salter.
Present.
Vice Chairman Montoya.
Here.
Chairman Kendall.
Present.
Chairman Kendall, I believe we have a quorum.
Excellent. What is your?
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America,
and
to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Let's go around the room and introduce ourselves. Morning, Commissioners, Representative Wong, members of the public, Deputy Director.
Chad Nelson, Assistant Operations Manager. Morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Directors. Public Relations, Paul Bella.
Chairman, Commissioners, my name is David Mann, General Counsel.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, members of Public Relations,
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, members of the audience, staff, directors. Morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, members of the public. I'm Lance Cherry, I'm the Chief of Information and Education for the Mexico Department of Communications. Good morning, I'm Robert Gray, I'm from the Field Operation. Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners, members of the public, certified IT.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Cassandra Pickard, Director for the department. My name is Lisa Wilkie, Chief of
Good morning, Commissioners. Chairman, Commissioner, my name is Jeff. Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners.
Name Casey Meyer, the Muncie Outlanders.
Good morning, I'm Kurt Kennedy with Kansas Energy Services. And overall, I am going to give you.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, Dr. Jones, I'm not sure you said that.
Morning, Chairman and Commissioners. I'm the TAP and Reading Program
Morning, Commissioners, support of the next allowed.
Chairman, Commissioners, I'm Finance and I'm Calvin here.
Morning, Chairman, Commissioner, members of the public, and available.
Morning, Commissioner. Frank Morris, Program Manager, Private Branch, in the
Morning, James Pittman, State of Iowa.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. My name is Bob Osborne, Assistant Chief of Finance.
Morning, Commissioners, that's the nominee partner.
Good morning, everybody. I'm still in the Southern Maine.
Good morning, I'm Mike Sloan, Chief of Fisheries for the Department.
Good morning, Commissioners, guests. I'm Martin Perea, Information and Education Division, Game and Fish.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Director Sandoval, Ross Morgan, Public Information Officer, Department of Game and Fish.
Good morning. My name is Sandra Ducharme. I'm the Executive Assistant to the Director.
You're so far away. Any other guests? Other department?
My name is Mike Herman, I'm an employee, Northeast Private Lands and Wildlife
Welcome. Can we get a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting? Second. All in favor? Aye. Agenda item number 7, approval of fiscal year 2020. Capital update requests.
Mr. Chairman, before we begin with the presentation, if I may, I would like to recognize Donald Cottomeo. He is the Deputy Director for the department. This will be his last commission meeting before he retires. I just want to say thank you for all the work. He and I started on the department at the same time, almost the same time, a couple months afterwards, after I started. But we grew up in the agency together, went a couple of different paths as we grew up. And Donald has held a number of positions within the department, including district officer, deputation specialist, major within field operations, and now deputy director. He has done an amazing job. I often refer to Donald as the yin to my yang. He's a very calm person, as most everybody knows, and I can get a little hyper at times. So Donald has always been an incredible partner in everything that we do with the department. I very much value his friendship, his knowledge of the department, and everything he's done for us and for the wildlife in the state of New Mexico. So thank you, Donald, for your service.
Thank you. Yeah, well, you remember who hired you? I don't know. It's been a while. I've got some pictures on the wall.
Number 6 was built the last. Congratulations, Jeff. Appreciate your service. More mundane subjects. Agenda item number 7, approval of fiscal year 2020 capital outlay request.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, agenda item number 7 is approval of the capital project plan for fiscal year 2020 through 2024. A note about capital projects, this is a separate appropriation from our operating budget. FY20 focuses specifically on wildlife habitat restoration and national projects and shooting ranges. In your binders, you should have a spreadsheet that shows the next 5 years of our capital outlay plan. DFA requires us to submit 5 years, but the legislature only approves 1 year at a time. So the next 4 years, the spreadsheet you have in front of you are anticipated projects, and they're all contingent on funding. Each project is approved is good for 4 years.
I don't think we have a spreadsheet. Do you want to have a spreadsheet? Do you have the spreadsheet, original spreadsheet?
I can provide this to you. So this next slide shows the capital budget for fiscal year 20. It focuses specifically on 2 projects. The first project is wildlife habitat restoration and management projects. These projects include preparing wetland, forest, and rangeland enhancement to prevent catastrophic wildfires, to improve watershed health, and enhance wildlife habitat. It also includes maintenance, development, and operation of state commission-owned properties. And that's for $1 million that comes from the Game Enhancement Fund. The second project for FY20 is related to shooting ranges, and that's for improvement, design, and construction of shooting ranges throughout the state. $250,000 of that is state protection, and the other $750,000 is from federal funding. So the next steps in this capital outlay plan is with your approval. We'll approve FY20 to FY24 capital project plan. This is due to the Department of Finance on July 2nd. Once submitted, DFA and NRC will have a hearing in mid-October. They will review our capital outlay plan. They will make recommendations, and then they will include all our capital projects in the capital outlay bill to be submitted to the legislature. And once that is approved or not approved, the governor will sign it or veto that bill. And with that, I have any questions.
So the only 2 projects are the ones you just listed?
That is for fiscal year 20.
Okay. And all, could you flip back to that spreadsheet? So all the money is either coming
from game protection or big game enhancement.
Big game enhancement, federal dollars, depending on the nature of the project. We have not indicated that here because we don't know how much we will actually be using the federal aid portion of it. That part is not appropriated by the state legislature and is done on a project-by-project basis with the feds. So that's why that amount is not indicated for the habitat project itself. It's an unknown at this time on how we'll be using the Pittman Robertson, knowledge of that project. Mr. Chair, Commissioner Ryan, it could be up to $3 million, potentially, but without knowing what the project is and what compliance is required or not, we wouldn't know. So the most it would be is $3 million, potentially not even matching at all. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, this is an action.
Chairman, I move to approve the fiscal year 2020 and fiscal year 2024 capital plans for the Highway Department.
Second. Any further discussion, questions, or comments? No? All in favor? Aye. Ayes have it. Thank you. And item number 8, recommendations.
Chairman, Commissioners, today we have agenda item number 8, verification. Pursuant to the rule, the verification rule, the department is to notify the commission of verifications or suspensions carried out pursuant to the Responsibility Act, energy assessment and wildlife violation compact. Today, we're only assessing wildlife violation compact. We have 11 individuals that are suspended in accordance with the wildlife violation compact. Today, we will also present 4 groups of individuals that are subject to revocation. Group 1 is the revocation of 5 individuals who accrued 20 more violation points within a 3-year period. They were sent notices of complicated action, requested a hearing was granted, and exceptions were filed. These exceptions were provided to the commission. Right for review. Sorry.
Mr. Chairman, do you want to work on these groups individually?
We're going to do it individually, and then I understand Mr. Bowman's here with his attorney, and Mr. Rankin's here, so we will separately. Anyone else here who's affected by any of these, potentially affected by any of these verifications? David Strong, Jerome Sanchez, Jeff Schoenberg is not.
Mr. Chairman, before we start discussing this group, I think there are a couple of refusals. We have a couple of refusals in this group. I just want to mention, personally, I would be refusing myself on the vote on Mr. Jess Rankin.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to recuse myself also from Mr. Sanchez.
Anyone else? So on this first group, is there anything further you need to present?
Mr. Chairman.
Any questions? We'll take Mr. Rankin. Any questions or comments on this particular matter?
Yeah.
Is that better? Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments from the commission on Mr. Rankin? No, we don't typically take any comment on this apart from what's already been written.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, you all were sent the written exceptions by the 5 individuals, as well as the hearing officer's report. By rule, that's what you take into account is those 2 elements.
Right. As to Jess Rankin, can I get a motion on this particular individual?
Mr. Chairman, I move to accept the recommendation of the hearing officer as presented by the department and revoke all license privileges of Mr. Rankin for the 3 years as recommended by the department.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Any further discussion, question, or comment? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? No opposed, and I note that Commissioner Ryan did recuse herself on this particular vote. Since we do have a recusal on Jerome Sanchez, I understand he's not here. Why don't we break him out individually as well? Can you give me just a little background on the Jerome Sanchez?
Mr. Chairman, I believe Mr. Sanchez was convicted of residency violation. He was a resident of Arizona and was purchasing resident hunting licenses in New Mexico. And some of his activities with those licenses were additionally egregious and that's why the hearing officer recommended a 5-year on that individual.
Can I get any discussion or comment on this one? Can I get a motion, please?
I move to accept the recommendations of the hearing officers presented by the department and revoke all license privileges for Jerome Sanchez.
Second. Any further discussion, question, or comment? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. I also note that Commissioner Ramos recused himself from this matter. Micah Bowen, note that he is here along with counsel. I do have a card from his attorney, Mr. Jones, directing us to take note of Mr. Bowen's written objections. Can you tell me a little bit about this particular?
Mr. Chairman, I'll have Lieutenant Cole discuss that.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, this case originally started as a residential violation. Mr. Bowen apparently lived in Texas, was purchasing New Mexico licenses, applying for and do a couple licenses and actually killed an animal in court. Was convicted of unlawful killing and unlawful possession, and as part of that agreement, the residency violation went away. I'll answer any questions based on that information.
Was there a conviction on this one?
Yes, sir.
Or,
Mr. Chairman, yes, there was.
is that in front of a magistrate?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, all these individuals that come before you for any revocation must have a conviction in a court of competent jurisdiction, typically the magistrate court, sometimes district, but they will all have a conviction before they come to the department, and then we assess those points.
Understood. Thank you. Any questions or comments on this particular item? Can I get a motion on this one?
Mr. Chairman, I move to accept the recommendations of the hearing officer as presented by the department and revoke all license privileges for Michael Bowman for the period of 3 years as recommended.
Second. Any further discussion, question, or comment? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? None opposed. For the remaining two individuals, David Chacon and Jeff Schoenbacher, I think we can do them as a group because they are not here today. Can I get a motion to these two individuals?
Mr. Chairman, I move to accept the recommendations of the hearing officers presented by the department and revoke all license privileges for David Chacon, 3 years, and Jeff Schoenbacher, 2 years, as recommended by the department.
Discussion? Second, any questions or comment? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, group number 2 is a group of 8 individuals who also accrued 20 or more violation points within a 3-year period, were sent notice of contemplated action, requested and received a hearing, but did not file an exception.
I don't believe any of these individuals are here, so I think we can take them as a group. Can I get a motion as to this particular group?
Mr. Chairman, I move to accept the recommendation of the hearing officer as presented by the department and revoke all license privileges of the 8 individuals for the length of time recommended.
Second. Do we have
Page, Mr. Chairman.
right? Okay. Yes.
Bradley Renshaw.
Do we get a second on that? All in favor? Aye. Ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Group 3 is an individual that accrued 20 or more violation points in a 3-year period, was sent a notice of contemplated action, requested a hearing, and went in front of the hearing officer. The hearing officer recommended no revocation, but we wanted to bring that in front of you because although that the hearing officer recommended no revocation, it is up to you all as the commission body to accept that recommendation or move forward as you see fit. So that's why we brought that individual to you.
Mr. Chairman, I move to accept the recommendation of the hearing officer as presented by the department and not revoke any license privileges of this individual.
Second. Any discussion or comment? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Ayes have it. Group number 4.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, group number 4 is revocation of 2 individuals who approved 20 more violation points with a 3-year period. They were sent notices of contemplated action and did not request a hearing.
Can I get a motion on this item?
Chairman, I move to accept the recommendations of the department as presented and revoke all license privileges of the 2 individuals or the length of time recommended.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Ayes have it. How's the revocation process going in general?
Mr. Chairman, it's moving very smoothly. We're in a very good place right now. The vast majority of our cases are, once the court process is adjudicated, we are sending out notices typically within days to 6 weeks. So we're literally moving pretty quickly. I don't see us ever having any issues like you saw in the past. It's working very smoothly.
And then stipulated agreements and other, I think we gave you some flexibility in dealing with things. How's that process working out?
Well, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, we've reiterated to our officers in the field that as they're working these cases and they feel that a stipulated agreement is forthcoming, to just remind them to use that tool. Often, again, hunting is a game of everywhere from, basic mistakes to the egregious. And when those mistakes happen, or those special circumstances occur, and they feel that's the best avenue, we've reminded them to bring those forward, because they're the ones doing the investigation. They're the ones looking those individuals in the eye and getting a feel for the totality of it. And we will continue to use those and work with our officers to ensure that if that's the best avenue, that's the route we take.
Well, that's important, because I know the commission relies on your frontline personnel to give us that totality of the circumstances. That tool, and that's appropriate. So, keep that. Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, Director Colonel Grego, I'm wondering what the department could do to make people more aware of this 20-point violation. And kind of what I have in mind is possibly when people are applying for for a hunt or purchasing a license of some type, clicking on a box after they read on what, this 20-point, how could they lose their hunting and fishing privileges? That's one. But not only that, I think we need to also see what we can do to reach out to the judicial system to maybe provide some professional development or recommendations to judges out there in our state to also make them more aware of pleading no contest doesn't mean you're not going to get any points, attached to you. And I think that's something that, we get phone calls from a lot of these individuals. They didn't know. They went to court. They were found. They pleaded no contest. They were charged a minimal court cost or deferred sentence or whatnot. And that does not mean that they don't accumulate any points. So just kind of getting more clarity on that, that level. But I don't know what we could do as a department to educate people on the severity of this.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Ronaldson, I agree wholeheartedly with you. The more education we can get out there and the more information, the last thing we want is, people violating the rules, but we don't want individuals to have to deal in a process that they thought was done. So I think we can educate. Obviously, we do post our rules on the web. Unfortunately, the vast majority of the public in general will not go and look at those rules. But Lieutenant Cole had come up with an idea very similar. Exceed those 20 points or accumulation of points to exceed 20 points, that they are subject to a revocation. And I believe we could do that working with the administration and the IT department to get something like that moving. I do have meetings with magistrate court systems at times with all the magistrate judges in the state, and that is something that we can bring up to make sure that they're bringing that forward. In my career, I often see that. They do know that there's that other consequence, not only the criminal and the fines that are associated with that, but civil as well as suspension of licenses. But I think it behooves us to get as much education and information out there as possible to ensure we're not missing something. So I agree, and that is something we'll work on.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just to add to that, we can certainly try and highlight those violations. They are printed in the rules and information booklet. They also are actually in the terms of agreement. Every time an individual applies on a big game hunting application, they have to agree. And we are a victim of what we call click-through process. People will just click through and agree to terms of agreements. We're not the only one. I think every online entity is victim of those types of things where people will just click OK and move forward. We can certainly do a better job of saying, hey, you really do need to pay attention to these terms of agreement before you click yes. And we can certainly work on that. But I do just want to point out that those are something, and the point revocation and all that information is something that is presented to each applicant every time they fill out an application.
I wouldn't characterize this as the victim. It is important to read, just like you're signing a contract. You need to read what's put in front of you. Inconvenient, slow you down. When you're clicking through, it's not throwaways. So I would encourage the public, read what's put in front of you, take the opportunity, constantly update your address, your information, whatever's necessary. Just because we've moved to an electronic system doesn't mean that all the old ways of updating your information go away. It's, in fact, easier to update your information in some cases electronically than it was doing it via paper. But you still have a responsibility to be mindful of what you're reading and signing or clicking on as you go through the application process. Any other questions or comments? Thank you. Good work.
Just for background, this picture on the screen in front of you is from the fire this year by Cimarron. And one of our officers that was working to block that road. That was the day it started. So.
Thank you. Mr. Cummings, update on construction of Albuquerque and Roswell office complexes. Item number 9. Morning, Mr. Chairman. We have some more pictures for you. And, are they on fire? We certainly hope not. Not as cool.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. First picture you're going to see is the Albuquerque office. They're putting up the stonework.
Can't hear you, Russ.
Okay. I had the same problem.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. The first slide you're looking at here is the exterior of the Albuquerque office. The stonework is being completed and should have been completed this week. The white is the actual insulation. and sealant. This office is going to be shut up by the end of the month, which means the doors, windows, and everything will be installed by the end of this month. More stonework. This is the interior stonework where the display case will be in front of this stonework at the Albuquerque office. Next is the drywall that's now going in for all of our office areas. We started off with the electrical room so we can run some temporary power into the offices to help the construction. And our security fence, which will be around our warehouse and covered storage areas. This is the high security fence that's being installed. There's a top piece to this fence, which is rather jagged and points out. Next on to the Roswell Complex update. The design is completed. The environmental assessment is in process. The archaeology is completed. 30-day public comments will be completed on June 25th. To date, we have not had any comments on the actual complex. Invitation to bid started on May 22nd, and we will actually be opening the bids tomorrow, June 22nd. Our target is to start construction in July, and construction complete target for February 2019. This is an overview of the layout of the Roswell property. As you can see in the bottom section is our office, the warehouse, and the covered storage. The rear aspect of the property, it will have archery ranges, 2 of them. And that is it. Any questions?
Mr. Chairman? Yes, sir. Director Russ, have you all ordered furniture? I know we had talked about furniture and trying to make it multi-purposeful, especially for the multi-purpose room.
The fixtures and accessories have been ordered. They are actually waiting for the warehouse walls to be put in so they can be stored until they're ready to be installed.
So it has been ordered then?
Sir.
I heard that the lease has now been signed with the city of Roswell. Is that true?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Ryan, that is true. And it's been signed, it's been filed. And we actually paid for 50 years in advance, and we filed a copy of that receipt with the memorandum of lease.
As far as the Albuquerque building, our goal is to have 2 or 3 meetings there of the 7.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Southwick, that's correct.
Any other questions?
When is the expected opening of the Albuquerque office?
At the October game commission meeting.
Very good.
Well, it's good.
All right, get back to swinging the hammer. Agenda item number 10, initial discussion for potential rule changes on game and fish licenses permits rule 19.30.9. Jim, you're gonna have to give up your seat. I am. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, this agenda item is proposed amendments to 19.30.9 NMAC, game and fish licenses and permits. Specifically, what we're proposing is to change add an eligibility restriction to become a New Mexico game and fish license vendor. The proposed amendment would specify that any entity that's regulated by the department under NMAC 19.30.8, the guide and outfitter rule, would not be eligible to become a licensed vendor. That would include registered guides, outfitters, and agents of landowners. This change would prevent potential conflicts of interest in the issuance of carcass tags for big game and turkey hunts. we will, if approved, we will post the submitted rule on the department's website, and public comments will be summarized for the commission. I will stand for any discussion or questions.
Yes, sir.
Would this change affect ranches or not outfitted by registered, but still sell licenses?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Rickwitz, it would not affect landowners, for example, that have agreements for E+ with us. It would only affect entities that are regulated under the guiding outfitter rule.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and Commission, I think just a little bit more explanation on the reason why we've done this is it is a conflict of interest when, particularly now that we have the carcass tags, when you have those individuals who are regulated by the department for the purposes of outfitting and guiding, then also issuing their own tags and licenses. Can be conceived and can be taken advantage of. I'm not saying it's going to happen rampantly, but we just need to protect the agency and those hunters from that type of action.
Mr. Chairman, Director Sandoval, I think I'm starting to wrap my brain around this with your comments that you just generated. I can see why. I think some of the current problems that are out there is that an outfitter who purchases a landowner tag and issuing that carcass tag, I guess the carcass tag is going to the licensed hunter when issued, and I guess that's what's going to be prevented. Is that what I'm kind of hearing from this? And it's keeping the outfitter from actually being able to sell those carcass tags or to issue them out? And was that already happening?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Ramos, I don't know if you would like Chad to answer that, but I guess I just put in there. Currently, right now, outfitters and guides are not able to sell licenses because of the conflict of interest. And this is just setting in stone that policy so that they are not able to take advantage of the system and be able to either through E+ or any other system issue licenses to their own hunters that have carcass tags associated with them for the potential of abuse of that.
Okay, so it's currently not happening. So this is to prevent that to happen possibly in the future. Okay, and I can see that. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I believe with us, we will present the proposed amendment at the next commission meeting.
At the last minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Carrie Romero on behalf of New Mexico Council of Outfitters and Guides. I wasn't going to say anything because I really didn't think that was the way that presentation was going to go. I think that this particular proposal is going to really be inconvenient for the outfitting industry. Back when we were initially discussing the carcass tag thing, that was the option that was presented to us. Oh, well, you're an outfitter, you can become a vendor. See how easy this is going to be? Just become a vendor and then you can be open. And all of these people, as long as you're willing to be open, can come and get their license and their carcass tag from you. And then you can also provide the carcass tag for your clientele. And so that was kind of the workaround. And then here we are, 6 months, a year later, and it's kind of flipping the complete opposite direction. I kind of knew this was coming a little bit because I did have an outfitter call me that had applied to become a vendor and was denied for conflict of interest. She's currently the only individual in Luna, remotely close to any sort of population setting, that is willing to be open 24/7 to issue carcass tags to just random individuals, as well as for clientele. Then it was recently brought to my attention just last week that with the landowner permits, there is not an option to mail the carcass tag to the outfitter. There is in the drop, but not in private land. So the carcass tag actually, whether you buy the license online or not, has to go to the address on file. So that means if you have somebody from like New York or something and they want to buy their license, then the carcass tag has to go to New York, whether the license is printed in New Mexico or not. So then that puts an added stress on the outfitter to have to go to the department. And, you know, the department initiated this, this online system to sort of ease things for everyone. And it seems like it's actually throwing more roadblocks in the way. So whereas previously, you know, 5-6 years ago, you had outfitters who were bringing in hundreds of individual licenses that needed to be printed out because there wasn't the online mechanism. Now you're going to have that again. You're going to have outfitters who they can't trust their hunters to print and bring their carcass tag from New York State. So they're going to be bringing hundreds of license applications to the department again to be printing carcass tag. It's going to put undue burden on the department. It puts an undue burden on the outfitter. And so it kind of just folds in tenfold with not being able to be a vendor. It's extremely inconvenient. Thank you.
Understood. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, may I add, I know this is our first year piloting this new carcass tag, and I know that we're seeing some hiccups, you know, with it, and I'm not sure they were overseen, but anyways, this is a problem. A lot of things that happen with outfitters is they hold on to these landowner tags until 2 days prior to the hunt because of cancellations or whatnot. And what does an individual do from New York, as Carrie put out? You know, how are they going to get that carcass tag on time before the hunt? And to me, again, I challenge the department to really try to expedite that other option electronically to be able to, you know, tag that animal with current technology, whether it's like photo or any other system. And I know that technology with cellular service in certain designated areas, you know, we know those areas where it's not so. I wonder if we need to kind of come up with a system for those type of areas as well. I don't know, but there are some flaws, and I know, again, it's being piloted for this first year, so we're going to have to really work together with outfitters as well as non-residents. And the other thing is, what if you lose your carcass tag? They ship it to the hunter, let's say in Roswell, New Mexico, and he's out in Unit 34, and he doesn't have his tag. He knows that, yes, he can go to his phone, here's my license, but I don't have a carcass tag. What are those scenarios that are going to be out there for people to do? Are they going to be able to run to a Walmart and purchase those? You know, what goes on?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Ramos, that's exactly what would happen in that case. They would not have to have it mailed to them out of state. Obviously, that would not work when they're here and they need a duplicate or something like that. Any vendor would be able to issue those, the duplicate on site. You know, they would be able to pick that up in state right there at that vendor.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Ramos, that was actually the reason why we allowed licensed vendors to issue private land elk licenses as well, so that they can get tags, and we allow them to issue tags so that it would be more convenient for customers to be able to get duplicates. If I may, I'd also like to address the tag mailing comment Carrie made. We had intended, when you apply, you have to enter an address where your tag will be mailed. We had intended to store that address in a separate database so that it would not overwrite the address that is in the customer's account. And we were not able to get that done in time for the application to open, but we are still working toward that. And we hope to implement that this summer well before the hunts begin, so that an outfitter will be able to enter, if they are purchasing it for their customer, they will be able to enter their own address, and it will not change the address in the customer's account.
I do have one other comment, and it's related to this, is I know that over in the southern part of the state, some carcass tags were already issued, or they have their hunting license that states bull, mature bull hunt, let's say an archery hunt, or, for example, rifle hunt, mature bull, rifle, elk hunt. And they're receiving carcass tags where it says antlerless or whatnot on there. So there's some discrepancies on the printout. You know, what are we going to do with those type of cases as well? And I know that this is a pilot year. We're learning as we grow.
So, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Ramos, if I may, we have been working with INA Division on a public campaign. The issue is actually those individuals who have drawn for an antlerless license type, and then they receive the tag, and it says, you know, if you have an antlered animal for which you are licensed, then you'll use the antler tag portion. Some people have come to believe that because they've been issued a tag that half of it says antler tag, they haven't actually read the back of it, and we have not done a good enough job in explaining that if you have an antlerless license, by getting a tag that says if you have an antlered animal, use the tag. It's not, we thought it was clear. Sometimes we, when you live and breathe this every single day, we don't do a good job explaining. So we are in the middle of developing a public campaign to hit every single licensed buyer and those who have drawn, and also reaching out to the general public, to let them know that if it is the license, the bag limit on the license, and not anything to do with the language on the back of the tag. I openly admit that we did not do a sufficient job we thought we had in distinguishing that, and so that's why we're working on a public campaign that will be rolling out, I believe, in about a month, right prior to the start of license season. Fully acknowledge that there's confusion out there, and we will work to correct that before hunting season starts.
To the extent there's confusion, the citations coming from us, I think the department has set us up for some significant problems. We'll deal with those as they come, but to put it bluntly, it's a mess. So, anyway, thank you. Commissioner Ramos. Anything further? Commissioner Montoya?
No, Mr. Chairman, this brings up a couple of things that concern me. If we're to a point where this isn't an action item, we've got some time to work on these glitches that are obviously in the system and see what we can do to put it together so that you've heard the concerns and we get around those concerns properly and see if we can satisfy the upcoming problems that we'll have in the middle of the season. Those drive us nuts. Lots of phone calls being involved with us. So.
Sir. Sure. Anything else? So we'll see this again when?
Mr. Chairman, next commission meeting?
Next commission meeting. Okay. And will that be the, and we'll see it one time after that, or final? So this is just the development phase. That's correct, Mr. Chairman. Okay. Very good. Any further questions or comments? Okay, thank you. Well, don't go anywhere. Although, let's see, agenda item number 11, initial discussion for potential rule changes on hunting fishing license application rule 19.31.3.
Moving on, next agenda item is proposed amendments to the licenses and application rule, 19.31.3, NLC.
So in summary, 1931.3.11 lists restrictions for licenses and applications. The proposed amendments would add areas designated as public or private land per current unitization agreements to the areas where licenses are valid. And it would specify that unitization agreements may apply to all small game, turkey, and big game species. In addition to that, we will, since all the species rules are going to be amended as well, we are going to remove any of the restrictions that are in the species rules and consolidate them into the restrictions in the licenses and application rule. And also we are going to remove the Pronghorn antelope language from 19.31.3.9 pursuant to recent changes to the A+ program and the antelope rule.
So, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, this really is about opening up all those unitization agreements for all of those species. Right now, we're restricted to just a couple of them. So this actually allows for more flexibility within the capacity of those unitization agreements. So it's not restricted just to barber sheep or for deer. It actually opens it up for all species and allows more opportunity across those, across mostly the southeastern part of the state of New Mexico, but it'll be for all of the species rather than just a couple.
I'm a big supporter of this initiative. Thank you to the department for doing this. This is a big deal for the checkerboard areas, for our landowners in southeastern New Mexico, so I appreciate the department's initiative on this.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Ryan, that's the benefit to these are that we gain access essentially by trading some of that private for public for hunting purposes only. We gain access to some of the checkerboard that otherwise would not be huntable. So we hope that this is a benefit for both the landowner and the public.
Those unitization agreements are on a year-to-year basis, in other words, they're valid for 1 year, correct, still?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Montoya, I believe that's correct.
Okay.
Next meeting then, we'll see this again.
Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
Will there be public meetings on agenda item 11 and 10 also, or just take public comments electronically?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Rickles, we plan to post this to our website as well and receive public comments as well.
So no public meetings at this time? I can't see that there will be a lot of activity there anyway.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Rickles, we don't have plans currently to have public meetings.
One public meeting. If it's appropriate, it's not, you're not getting it. If there's no significant public comment, it's no big deal. If you're getting a lot of comment, you might be aware of that in the meeting too. So people can visit about it from above. Any other questions or comments on this one? Okay, we'll see you next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Stuart Riley Show. 12/13.
Get comfortable.
The seatbelt on the stage.
Agenda item number 12, completed habitat-related projects throughout the state for the past 4 years. Stuart.
Morning, Commissioners. Just a second, get this presentation open. Great, so in front of you first today, so that's what we have in front of you today. Really our habitat program within the department, the goal is really to partner with other entities, federal, state, NGOs, private landowners to stream habitat for our fisheries as well. Why it specifically says in that one bullet, mule deer, elk, pronghorn, turkey, bighorn, etc., is that Big Game Enhancement Fund is set up specifically the account to sell those statewide enhancement authorizations is for the management of those species, and management of that to also include habitat management. So we really focus a lot on those species. The other ones are, some of the other funds, and I'll get to it here in a second, are dedicated funds such as, like I just discussed, a big game enhancement fund that's specific for deer, specific for elk, specific for bighorn. We have our habitat management and access validation fund, which is part of the state package that every hunter buys. Part of that money goes back to improving state game commission properties. We've spent over the last 4 years and committed over the next 4 years $4 million of that fund. So that burn that we showed you on Cole and Neblet is an example of that. Improvements to the Huey wildlife area is an example of those. Some of the river restoration projects that we've done use the come off. Game protection fund, the general fund that is overseen for the department, we use part of that fund, but a lot of our habitat funds are separate funds, including the habitat stand fund. Over the last 4 years and over the next 4 years, we've either spent or committed $32.75 million on habitat restoration across the state. A lot of that is federal funding. $21 million of that is our federal PR money for the most part. So we're able to match that. Like Director Sandoval stated earlier on in the Capitol, what we do is we create those projects, put them forth in front of the federal agency, which, Fish and Wildlife Service, get that PR money, we get all the compliance done, and get acceptance, and then use that money to triple our ability to improve habitat across the region. So we'll go through and highlight a few projects. Everyone likes pictures for the most part, not necessarily words. So we'll go through. We broke out the quadrants of the state real quick. What this is the northeast portion of the state. The dark red are polygons where we completed a habitat project, and the lighter red is those projects where we're in the planning phase. So we might be working on compliance, whether it be archaeological compliances or some kind of tree stand compliance or something we're doing, but we're on the way to moving on those projects and we're getting there. We'd like to highlight 3 projects out of the Northeast that we've completed. One is in the Northeast in the Carson National Forest. We've been working heavily with the National Forest there on some restoration projects in there. One is also on the Muscaro area on the Bell and Trigg Ranch, where we've used some state match, some water trust board money that was going to be put forward, but we were able to bring PR money to that. It wasn't department money on the state match. We were able to just bring that federal money to improve some property. And then another one on the Rio Castillo. So in the Carson National Forest, what we were really working on is ponderosa pine restoration, trying to make those fire tolerant through time, make it better habitat for either birds, wild deer, elk, etc. But you'll see there is this kind of a more even stand ponderosa that we've gone in and we're working to get all age classes back through there and not really a lot of the encroachment of some of the younger trees that we're finding there. This is kind of a project just out to the east of here, like I said, on the Bell and Trigg Ranch. We've masticated over 7,000 acres of pinyon juniper. You can see in here, and I'll kind of follow up with the cursor, you can see it, this kind of mosaic pattern where we've gone in on multiple 7,000 acres and used masticators to really replicate what a fire, this is what a natural fire start would look like through time. They don't burn a full stand replacement, they burn in mosaic patterns. So we're trying to replicate that with masticators to really improve wildlife habitat. Rio Castillo is a big fisheries project that was done up on the Rio Castillo, just outside of Bermejo, in between Bermejo and Rio Castillo on the Valle de All. What you'll see there is really the channel is pretty wide through here. Water was running very shallow. You'll see they put a bend in the river as well, and also deep in the channel, better fish habitat. So a lot of those projects not only span the terrestrial world, but also the aquatic world as well. Northwest, we've worked extensively on the Northwest. You'll see there a lot of the forests. We've worked a lot on in the BLM. We have some big planning projects going on in the area in these big red polygons where we're planning on getting ready to go working in. And a lot of completed projects in there. 2 of the ones that I think are of big interest are actually, one is on our property, on the commission property on the Rio Channel WMA, and one is on the San Juan River that had a large benefit for wildlife. This is the Rio Chama WMA, a big winter range for mule deer. We have thousands of mule deer that will winter in there every year. It's a decadent sagebrush. So we went in and did a bunch of sagebrush work. What you see here is we went in and actually mowed the sagebrush, then tilled in a bunch of native forbs and native other shrub species that are really beneficial to deer. The sage will come back after you mow it like that. It's better nutrition, especially in the winter time when the nutrition is really limited for those deer. So it's worked really well. It's attracted a lot of deer to the area, and it's helped carry them through the winter. We also did a lot of ponderosa pine work within the Rio Chama. This is what you'll see there. We've masticated. You can see some of the mastication piles in here, and also some of the where we've cut trees to get a better stand alignment throughout the Rio Chama. This would be a lot more fire tolerant too. You can see the fire comes in, there's not a lot of ladder fuels to take it up into the ground. And we think if the fire did come through there, we'd be fire tolerant as well. San Juan Restoration Project was a huge project. As you can see, some pretty heavy equipment in the actual river, but it's really trying to get to where the river ran straight through here. And again, thin, not as deep, trying to get some pooling of the water. 2 channels now really are created both on both sides of the banks that allow some deep channeling, better fish habitat overall. In the southwest, we've been working extensively. We've completed one really big project that consisted of multiple projects, I guess, and this is this big polygon here, and that's why we just say Gila National Forest, not a specific project name. They kind of come together and combine. We're working on some bigger projects as well. This is one of the ones in the San Mateo Mountains, really working on deer, elk, habitat restoration, working on that woody browse, that mahogany component that's really been missing in a lot of these forests what we've been working on. And you can see the mastication in here, the hand crews have thinned out. So this again is trying to replicate what a natural fire would look like 100 years ago, cutting the stands out in a mosaic pattern. But then we're able to follow that back up now with a controlled burn because it's not going to have enough fuels, ladder fuels to get up into the canopy and have a catastrophic wildfire. Again, we see a lot of this browse component coming back that's big for deer especially. Another big project that happened was on Slaughter Mesa. Slaughter Mesa used to be connected to the plains of St. Augustine, but through time we had woody encroachment in juniper. We actually gone back in, you can see the skeletons of the trees that we cut and recreated those corridors, and we see a lot of pronghorn used back and forth in that corridor. So it's important for those pronghorn to come up during the summertime when they have a lot of green growth in there, but be able to migrate back down. That Slaughter Mesa area can get up to 4 or 5 feet of snow in the wintertime if they're enclosed in there without wouldn't be allowed. The other one that we wanted to highlight is the Mimbrus River Restoration. That project has really helped out a lot of kind of sensitive species that have been in decline. There was about 1,500 river feet that were actually restored. Really looking at Chawamach, Rio Grande sucker, and also Chiricahua leopard frog. You'll see where we created pools. We really changed the whole dynamics of that riparian border, especially in the desert habitat. This is a refuge for a lot of those species that are imperiled right now that need a little bit of help, and hopefully get these where we have a robust population. Southeast, we would like to kind of talk about 2 big projects. One is it's not a competing project, but one we're kind of excited about the planning phase, and that's the Southern Sacramento Restoration Project. It's one of our largest planning projects we've been working on in the state. Largest that we've been involved in the last 4 years, and one that we've taken the lead on outside of the Forest Service. We're actually paying and conducting NEPA to get it done so we can work in the mixed conifer forest. It's always nervous for people to work in the mixed conifer, and we're trying to get into there. And then another one of prescribed fire on the same range. But this is the Southern Sacramento planning area. So you'll see here the kind of map here. This is the Southern Sacramento. This is the Mescalero plan. This is what we're planning for. We're clearing this entire area so we can eventually work on habitat work for the next maybe 15, 20 years in here to really improve deer, elk, wildlife habitat, just general forest health throughout that entire southern portion of Sacramento. And then lastly, one of the project that's been a big success, not only for prairie chickens, but for quail. We saw a huge response in there, and that's in the Sand Ranch area on the BLM, where we've done a lot of prescribed burning and seen a great response from hatchlings from quail to the prairie chickens and everything else. And so just kind of going through the state highlights and projects that we've done. But I would take any questions.
Mr. Chairman, Stewart, what a celebration you have brought to us today. And I got to be honest with you, I'm so excited to see what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing. And I just had to, I know that we had this public meetings about a couple of months ago, And I did request Ruben Teran to give me a report, just give me some quadrant reports on what are we doing with these dollars. And when he showed me that list of everything that's going on, it just floored me. And what a celebration, not only to the agency, but our volunteers with these committees, members that are appointed by this commission. Your work is definitely showing right here. The dollar distribution that you're seeing in each quadrant versus one portion of the state getting all the dollars as it's been in the past. It's spread out everywhere and everyone's benefiting from it. And I'm just so excited about that. Not only that, but the collaboration that's going on within our agency with fisheries and wildlife and discussing, hey, where are we going to have to improve habitats and whatnot. And the last thing is also reaching out to the public on where else should we go, what next, and really goal setting for the department. But again, I'm excited. I may be the only one on this, but great work. It just shows that we're not only about hunting and fishing, but we're doing what's best for the world that we live in here in New Mexico. Thank you, Stuart. Great job.
Jim? Yes, sir. Stuart, I know that we've had that fire up in the park country. It's maybe drifted off into the Barker. And we've had some controlled burns in there in the past. I'm sure it's done some good, but in a rough way. Statement on it?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Montoya, so the fire really kind of went into the Colon Nevelet, drifted up into the Nevelet just briefly into the very southern portion of it. Where we've been working in the Colon Nevelet right now is in the northern portion, so it actually didn't touch much of where our habitat improvement. So if you remember those pictures I showed you of us burning piles earlier, that was actually in the Nevelet. While that fire was growing, they got lucky on a couple of days when they had a back wind where it burned back into a southern slope progression, but the fire team, the big managers, were looking at where were breaks that we could potentially stop the fire to continue. And one of the big breaks they were looking at is where we actually went in and did a bunch of forest work in the previous years, saying this is an actual break we can maybe stop the fire progression. Makes it. Never made it to there. We didn't see much of a stand replacement loss across the Nevelet. On film, I did see a large stand replacement. The game commission property and stuff did not see full stand replacement.
This is so cool. I think there should be a public education announcements and information going out. Review communication personnel. This is just great, and people should know what good habitat management looks like and why we need to manage our forests and the habitat for these wildlife and why it does good and why it protects it and gives it a long life. So get it out there.
Good job. Great work.
One last thing, and I think that just shows, and I think even legislation should hear what's going on with our dollars here, because we are using federal dollars and local dollars to really enhance these projects and to make it available. And this would be a great presentation for them to see what we are all about here.
Any other questions or comments? All right. Let's take a quick break and then we'll move on to number 13. public comment to directly below agenda item number 17. It looks like on my agenda that public rule hearing will be before public comment. And I'd like to get a motion to move agenda item number 18, general public comment, to directly after agenda item number 17.
I'll make a motion to move agenda item number 18 to directly after agenda item number 17 and before the public rule.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Ayes have it. Agenda item number 13.
All right, Commissioner, so what we have now is we're about halfway through the stretch on our big game rules for this season. As you know, we have down to the last two big game rules for opening and going through the deer analysis. Before you hear is deer. Just real quick, the 2017 Harvest Day, this will actually be posted on our website in the next week or so. Last year, we sold 36,000 licenses approximately across the state. 88% of our hunters reported our harvest results, so that's a great reporting rate. It really gets us great data. Statewide average for deer last year, success rates were 35% success. Harvesting, we estimate about just over 11,000 bucks and 96 does. Our satisfaction ratings have been coming up in the last couple of years. You'll see there 3.4 out of 5, so not too bad really overall. Some of the bigger proposed changes that we're making that are non-GMU specific, again, like all of our rules, like we talked about, we'll adjust the season dates given the calendar creep. We'll be adjusting or proposing adjusting licenses based off the biological data and the management goals that are set forth for those GMUs. During the ensuing 4 years where the rule is in, we're collecting data every single year on the populations, whether it be harvest or survey data, and then we come in front of you and make those recommendations for either license increase or decrease based upon our objectives and what we're seeing on the ground. One of the other big proposals that we have in front of you that we're going to put out to the public as well is currently in a lot of the southern GMUs, we have the archery hunt where you can have September or January on those hunts. You draw one tag, you can hunt either month. We're proposing maybe splitting that into 2 different draws. So either you draw the September hunt or you draw the January hunt. Licenses won't change. We don't see a big change in licenses, but the number of people that would receive those would almost double. So right now, let's say we have 200 tags for the January or September, we now draw 200 in each one of those months because it allows it. The other one we heard during the pronghorn rule development and during our public meetings, and really we implemented this in the pronghorn rule with splitting GMUs 31 and 32. We would propose that for deer. When we were developing the pronghorn rule, the same sentiment was put forth by both the public and a lot of landowners in those GMUs to split it for deer as well. So that's proposed. Throughout, there's definitely some new opportunities that we'll be able to create new hunts where the population would allow, and it would, some of the public comments we received over the ensuing 4 years shows. One of the other things that we're kind of kicking around an idea that we've heard from the public and we're looking into, right now the youth hunt, we have a youth hunt that's 3 different weekends. It starts on Wednesday before Thanksgiving and then runs concurrent weekends, but it has a break in between. So it might go end on a Sunday and then start back up on a Saturday and then end on that Sunday and start back up. There's some desire, we've had some to run just a concurrent 9-day season for those public youth hunts, starting either the Saturday before the Thanksgiving, because some kids get a full fall break the week of that Thanksgiving, or that Wednesday before Thanksgiving. So it's something we'll take to the public, try to get some more input. We don't really see anything from the biological aspect that would change harvest rates. It's really kind of more of where people are looking at. I'm going to go through each area real quick on the proposed changes. We're getting to it. In the Northeast right now, there's been some sentiment and they would like, we have mature buck whitetail deer tags in the Northeast. There's been a push to get some of that as an either sex whitetail deer tag, where we're seeing a lot of growth and expansion of whitetail in some of these areas, and we're not opposed to that. We think the population can sustain it. In fact, the population can probably still continue to grow even with that. Those GMUs were based on biological data suggest where we can increase some harvest on the deer populations. You'll see there 41, 42, 3, 5, 7, 8. We all think we could increase some here. We're not talking big increases. Probably net change over the Northeast is about a 5% increase in deer licenses, but those specific GMUs, we would. There is some discussion, initial discussion right now about opening the Vive-et-al to an archery deer hunt. The Vive-et-al has not been open to deer hunting, but there is a growing population. The Colonial Fire really helps with some of that. There is a small population in there. It's not extremely large, but a limited archery deer hunt is kind of on the table right now for a discussion. I think the population is sustained. And then also adding some either sex whitetail deer hunts in GMU 56. Again, that population of whitetail is starting to grow throughout, and we want to allow that opportunity. And then creating archery hunt in the Colin Neblett area. Right now, there is not an archery hunt in the Colin Neblett. The opportunity exists and the population is sustained. In the Southeast, right now, the hunts and when I say GMU 30, the main focus of the Guadalupe Mountains, it's disjunct that we don't have all the licenses evenly spread out amongst hunts, so some hunts have a lot more licenses than the other. We're proposing not necessarily changing the number of licenses, just distribution of hunters across that. GMU 31, 33 decreased the licenses on the Huey. What that's about is the department used to maintain some control of the Seven Rivers and another area down along the Pecos River where we don't have a BOR deeded us all of the Huey now, so it's a smaller area. We still allow youth hunters on those two other properties within its Brantley and Seven Rivers down along the Pecos, but we are just focusing now harvest just on the Huey, so we don't want to have too many hunters hunting waterfowl. That is correct. It's the main focus on that area is for waterfowl. GMU 34 is our biggest proposal is moving the deer hunt out of the muzzleloader deer hunt out of the rifle, out of the elk rifle period, and then increase some of those licenses in those GMUs. And the only one that biologically it looks like we should probably be decreasing some licenses to GMU 33 in the Southeast. Southwest area, we've been working with White Sands Missile Range to create probably a limited draw on White Sands Missile Range for mule deer. It's been quite a while since mule deer have been hunted on White Sands. The population has seen it, and we'd like to create a hunt there. And then move the off-range hunt so that GMU 19 off the White Sands Missile Range, move it a little bit later into the season. GMU 23 and 24, including the burrows, we are proposing a license reduction in those GMUs. GMU 23, the burrows specifically, we're looking at potentially really making that a more of a quality hunt experience. It is a separate draw out of GMU 23, reducing those licenses and potentially lengthening the time period for that hunt. From right now, it's currently 5 days, potentially going to 9 in the burrows. And also biologically, GMU 26 and 27, that's in the very Boot Hill state, down in the Palacios, hatches, et cetera. It's the data suggesting that we should probably reduce licenses some in there. In the Northwest area, the population can sustain a little bit of an increase in GMU 2B and 2C on some of those deer hunts. One of the bigger proposals in 4 is 4 has 3 WMAs or commission-owned properties in there. The Humphreys, the Rio Charm, and the Sergeant. And so we have 3 different game commission properties in there. The Sergeant currently is closed to deer hunting. We're proposing opening the Sergeant to deer hunting, but also creating a new bow hunt that would expand the option of allowing you to hunt any of those 3 WMAs if you draw a tag. And so it'd be a new opportunity in there. There's a lot of deer in the Sergeant during the fall, but we're proposing that. And then including those in there. The other thing is have a very limited kind of quality hunt late season November. Very few tags in those 3 GMUs for rifle. GMU 5A and GMU 5, we create a muzzleloader hunt, that late September muzzleloader hunt that starts the last day of September typically and runs for 5 days. Create those hunts in there. An archery hunt in 5B, we don't have one right now. We propose that and increasing some rifle licenses. 6A and C, we propose increasing the muzzleloader hunt in there as well. The population is growing where the Las Conchas fire was. We've seen some pretty nice growth out of that deer population post-fire, a lot of browse, and we think we could have increased opportunity. You'll see that increased opportunity in GMU 7, 8, a new archery hunt. And then GMU 10, some of the data suggests we probably should decrease its success rates and satisfaction rates if we can decline for GMU 10 deer hunt. It's probably not as much biological, but probably hunter density issue that we're proposing changing some and decreasing that. Same with 12. And then in GMU 14 is creating a January bow hunting 14. We currently don't have one in there, and then also increases rifle opportunity. So with that, I'll take questions, but I'll also note that we will go out in the next month and go around the state with our public meetings, combined public meetings for deer and elk for this. We'll come back in August with kind of a final recommendation and then a final vote on this rule that occurred.
Thank you. Comments?
Thank you, Chairman and members of the Commission, Dr. Sandoval. One quick comment on some of the tag increases, just on behalf of Neil Deer Foundation. We would like to see some of those units, not any specific units right now in general, but statewide, some of those units be managed a little better for trophy opportunities and some for hunting opportunities. A lot of the feedback that we've gotten from our members across the state is that our quality of hunts have decreased. They're seeing more hunters than they are animals, and they want to have a higher quality hunt and have higher quality habitat, higher quality animals to be able to have on those hunts. One quick thing I just wanted to give the commission and the department an update on was our recent Governor's Tag raffle that the Neil Deer Foundation hosted and held. And first off, I want to give my extreme sincere appreciation to the department for their support on this raffle, because with our agreement that we have in place, we're able to auction off a tag at our national convention, but also raffle off a tag for those who can't afford a $72,000 deer tag. But all of the funds from the raffle and from the auction go to our state wildlife enhancement tag fund to do some of the projects that Stuart mentioned earlier. So an update, we hit record numbers this year, and a lot of that I think was contributed to the department. We were able to send out an email blast to all of the customer base from Game and Fish, which within 48 hours had an increase of $8,000 in tag or raffle ticket sales. So thank you for that. But our total numbers ended up with $35,631 generated for the Wildlife Enhancement Tag Fund, with over 2,234 tickets sold. So the odds were really good for this tag as well. So I just wanted to go on record and thank the department, thank the INE and Wildlife Divisions for helping us with this raffle. And we'll be sending you a check for $35,000 shortly.
Thank you.
Stuart, you mentioned something about an archery hunt that could either be in October or January. We kind of lost you on that. Was that a youth hunt?
So, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Montoya, currently right now in most of the southern units, we have, if you apply for archery deer, the season is September 1 through 24 or January 1 through 15. So you have a break in the season. So I can hunt the January hunt, or I can wait and hunt hunt the September hunt, or wait and hunt the January hunt. What we're proposing is make those two separate draws. Either you decide to hunt the September hunt, or you hunt the January hunt. So it'll provide not necessarily any more actual numbers of deer harvested, but it'll provide more opportunity for hunters.
I didn't hear the either or part. Okay.
And then for the record, Stuart, I know I've talked to you, but looking at the northeast corner, I know it's private, but that 41, those units, if we could throw out, I know I have some people I know up there that would like to have maybe 5, the January bow hunt opportunity for public draw. Some of the, whatever units we could, if it's feasible.
Commissioner Southwick will definitely look into that in some of the northeast areas for January bows. Highlight.
But I do like, and Bill, your question was good. Right now it stands at September end, and when I was on the commission, it was or before, and I made the push to go to end, and I get it. We need to go back to or September or January. It actually creates more opportunity for hunters. So good job.
Further questions or comments on this? When will we see this again? Next.
Mr. Chairman, you'll see that in August.
Agenda item number 14, initial discussion for potential rule changes on the elk rule 19.31.14 NMAC for the 2019-2022 season.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, proudly announce this is the last big game rule of the 4-rule cycle that we're opening. So it's been a long spring, winter, but we're there. This will be every rule that will be open after this meeting for 4-game, big game, and also a lot that are closed. But real quick on elk, we manage elk across most of the herd units in the state. We divided up into 16 herd units in the state. This is just a quick graphic of where those herd units are. We split hunter opportunity based off of GMUs, but we really are managing more of the herd units with elk, kind of where more or less a cohesive population exists. Want to go through real quick the 2017 harvest data. Statewide, we sold just shy of 37,000 licenses last year. 81% of our hunters reported their harvest last year, which is great. And we had an almost 40% success rate on harvest across all weapon types. So a very high success rate. You know, you have some states reporting down to 12, 15% on the statewide average. So we're very high on our success rates on the hunts. Estimated harvest, you'll see there just over 8,000 bulls and just over 6,000 cows. Again, another thing I'd like to point out is a satisfaction rating, a scale of 0 to 5, 3.66, which is increasing 2 times. So hunters are fairly satisfied with our elk hunting opportunity that we do now. Some of the bigger proposed changes that we are making for elk, again, it's just the standard adjust seasons for the calendar dates, adjusting the licenses based off of the biological and management goals within those areas. But one of the bigger ones, and we'll get to it in the next presentation when we talk about E+, but really adjusting the core boundaries in these, or where those the core boundary resides within those herd units to really be more biologically based. There's some of those cores that we're kind of drawn on ease rather than on biological. And so we're really going to propose drawing that. What that does is change the split within the GMU where public-private licenses go. But we're really going to get at that. We'll have maps that we'll be able to present to you all of where our proposed changes would be for each individual core. I do have in here which cores we're planning on not creating, but changing a little bit. And we'll have that. There also is opportunity here to create some new opportunities throughout the state. Real quick rundown by the herd units and then specifically on some GMUs. So the San Juan herd, which lies up in GMU 2, it's been under rule of managed as a quality hunt management. Really, we as a department, biologically based, and also focus more on deer in the GMU 2 and that San Juan herd. It's not as much of an elk population, it's a transitory elk population. Our proposal is actually removing that from a quality designation and actually offering more opportunity in GMU 2. We have a lot of herd units throughout the state where we manage for quality, whether that be the Gila or down in the 36 area, but we really think 34 or GMU 2 could be one where we could pull it out of the quality designation. There's also discussion about that core boundary, like kind of just along the Forest Service line in there. We're talking about the potential of removing the core in there. We could have further discussion. We're going to present this back out to the public, landowners, that area, et cetera. And we'll come back with you in August what we hear from the public, but that's kind of our initial cut right now. GMU 9, which is the Mount Taylor herd, we're still seeing declines in that population. You'll see there the 4-year average in there, bull to cow ratios have declined, but calf to cow ratio still remains suppressed. That's where we've been running this large study on calf predation. We're really seeing calf predation being mainly limited by coyote predation. And so we're working on that right now. We're at the point now, we still see a big decline in population. We're having problems finding out. We're proposing probably closing cow hunting in that because of where we are with the population status. We're going to also have to reduce the bull licenses based on the decline in that population. We also maybe look at possibly extending that core boundary to include some of its winter range off to the east. But the main focus on that herd is trying to at least stabilize the decline if we can, and we're working towards that. We just captured 35 calves so far this year, and we're working on some coyote control work to try to get that population to at least stabilize and hopefully increase. We want to see that calf to cow ratio at minimum in the 30s, and so we're quite a ways off still. North Central herd, which includes 450, 5B, 51, 52. We've really focused a lot of that in the last rule cycle on targeting cow harvest in 51. We've run quite a few population management hunts in there. We've also redistributed licenses at the last rule cycle to really target our harvest there. We think it's working well. There's maybe a potential to increase some licenses in that 51 portion again this time period, but we'll continue to look at it. But again, one of the other possible options in here is to target maybe some cow harvest late in GMU 50. where those elk do come in on winter range. But right now, overall, bull harvest, we're planning on, our proposal is to maintain. In the Hamus herd, which is GMU 6A through CN7, including GMU 6B, which is the Valles Caldera. One of our proposals at this time, we've been working with the Valles Caldera, as you all know, for the last few years, trying to get some of those roads open for mobility impaired hunts that we have difficulties with. It's probably our lower satisfaction rating hunts in there because there's only 2 roads open. Caldera is not at this point proposing opening those roads, so we're proposing not having that mobility hunt in there anymore. We don't want to have a mobility impaired hunt in there where people can't access where the elk are. So we look at maybe putting that hunt somewhere else, but no longer having that hunt in there. We're working with the Valles Caldera right now to try to get out license numbers. We think there is potential for some expansion, some increased bull hunting opportunity. We'll continue to work on that. And we'll continue to petition for opening those roads back up for mobility impaired hunters. We just kind of want to get you on notice that we will work with them and hope to get that. So.
Chairman Stewart, hold 1 second. You're going pretty quick. That Mount Taylor herd that you talked about, bring back to slot.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Montoya.
That's coyote predation and not bear predation.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Montoya. Yes, the majority of our predation, so the population's survival, calf survival is limited by predation. The main predator in that population is coyote, followed by bear, and comparable maybe to mountain lion after that. And so it was a surprise to us. We weren't suspecting coyotes to be the main limiting factor in there, but it was. We're working the next 2 years to try to get at that, but we're monitoring as we work with the coyote population to see if we can improve elk survival, and we'll have those results. But in the interim, it really is why we're eliminating those cow hunts. We need to do something now so we don't continue to.
16 calves per 100 cows. I think they cut it.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Montoya, that's the 4-year average. We have some years in there that are below 10.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Stewart, I also have some comments on actually GMU's 6A, C7, particularly the Valles Calderas, and I understand the removal of the mobility impaired hunt, and being that there's limited access basically with roads going in there for those type of hunters, I would like to see double, triple archery rifle hunts in that and giving more opportunity for the do-it-yourself backpacker type of hunter, sportsman. If we're having limited access, well, let's go ahead and allow some more opportunity there.
Chairman, Commissioner Ramos will definitely pass that on. We'll meet with Caldera here pretty soon. We also think biologically that population can sustain some.
Absolutely.
Any other questions or comments?
Moving on to the southwest area, if we can. In southwest area, the Dow herd, that population is pretty stable to slightly increasing. Part of it is expanding that core boundary. Right now, what they refer to as the narrows is outside the core. It's more or less where a large concentration of elk is. We've probably expanded out to there. Other than that, we really aren't proposing any changes to license numbers. Same with the Greater Gila. We're not really proposing any changes in there. As we've discussed, we're getting ready to enter into a large elk study in there, monitoring elk-wolf interactions in there. They'll give us a lot more information as we build the next rule, but right now, our ratios are fairly stable, our hunts are fairly stable, bull to cow ratios are maintaining, so we're not proposing any increases or decreases within that Greater Gila herd, 15, 16, 8, San Mateo herd, it's maybe increasing a little bit, bull to cow ratios are a little bit on the incline. We might look at a slight license increase. Right now, we're not proposing it, but one of the other things is extending the core boundary on the south-west portion of that GMU potentially, and a little bit of the other areas. The less up here, Gila herd, those are kind of those periphery units surrounding the main portion of it. One of the things that is being discussed is a late season archery hunting there. Right now, we have those late season APRE hunts, and point restricted 6-point that are over the counter, but we're actually, people like those hunts. We've had some asking that we put some in rule actually, and so this would be an opportunity, I think, where we could put in a late November hunt for archery hunting in there. It's not going to have a high success, we know it probably won't, but there is the potential of the population to sustain it. So in those two GMUs, 21 and 23, we're potentially proposing putting that in there. And then there's been some discussion about maybe combining GMUs 21 and 20B. We're gonna have to look at that a little bit more. We're gonna look at hunter densities, but it has been one that's been thrown out. But also the population, we think we can increase mature bull licenses in there. And then extending the core boundary in 21 to where it joins into 17 is where we really need to probably, where that habitat linkage is throughout those areas. In Southeastern, we have kind of two main herd units, the Sacramento herd in GMU 34 and the Rio Doso herd in 36. In 34, what we're proposing is increasing draw licenses, particularly on the female segment, as you guys are all well aware. We get quite a bit of feedback to try to harvest more elk out of GMU 34. We've been pretty successful. We've had a lot of population management hunts in 34 in the last rural cycle. We've probably knocked the herd back some. It's hard to say because, again, in that area between 34 and 36, it's the Mescalero Reservation. It's a little bit difficult to really get a handle on what that population is actually doing without having the survey data in there. But one of the things we are recommending, we've heard from some of our hunters, is if we're really trying to stress increasing some cow harvest, is taking those mature bull hunts in GMU 34 and making those either segment hunts. So the opportunity is if someone doesn't want to take a raghorn bull to be able to take a cow hunt, so we're proposing that at this time. And then also modifying potentially the core boundary on both the east side and mainly on the west side and the northwest side where it joins on Mescalero Reservation. GMU 36, you'll see there, that's the highest bull to cow ratio we have in the state. And I might want to go around and look in the nation, it might be the highest bull to cow ratio in the nation at 71 bulls to 100 calves. You'll see also strong calf numbers in there. So that's increased over this last rural cycle. We're proposing an increase in basically all bull licenses, all weapon types, archery through rifle, muzzleloader, etc. Yellowstone National Park runs a bull to cow ratio of probably 55 to 60 to 100, so we're well above even an unhunted population. It's hard to say if it's a function of the fire that occurred there 4 or 5 years ago, or if it's a function potentially of Mescalero's reservation conservative harvest probably contributes to some of that as well. In the northeast area, it really here is just a couple minor changes. 45, we probably need to extend the core boundary on that west side. Nothing there. That herd's fairly stable. It's actually a really hard herd to survey. It's all high density conifer forest where we really can't get out a great survey in the fall. So I wouldn't really focus too much on those ratio data. When we do get a survey in there, it varies greatly year to year. 48, one of the things we were considering is, and that's our White Peaks area, is moving the bull hunt from December back into to October, and really no changes in 49 or 53. One of the things we did in the last rural cycle is in 53 is created a Midnight Meadows hunt area to focus on wintering concentrations. It's worked really well. We have a lot fewer complaints in that area over this last rural cycle. Two other big ones would be establishing actually core boundaries in GMU 12 and possibly 37. We're currently outside the core. It's currently there's strong, robust populations of elk. We think it probably should be managed in the core and establish those as herd units. So those would be two. One of the things, and we'll get to that when we get to the next presentation in the E+, is creating some special management zones in 46, 54, 55. We'll wait on that until we get to the next presentation. And then license adjustments, some minor ones outside of separating the youth hunts and adult hunts on Vive et al., increasing some licenses in 56 and 57. And then the other kind of exciting one is there is now public access to the Sabinosa Wilderness area in 42. We want to create a limited elk hunt for a public draw in 42, 57, 59. Combine those three units, not a real robust, big population of elk, but allow some opportunity for some public hunters to get in there and harvest those elk. And then you'll see here, maybe combining the Colin Nebula like we do for deer, for elk, and then establishing a new hunt in GMU 14 in the Manzana Mountains, potentially a limited hunt on Moosmer. And one of the other big things we're talking about is our youth encouragement hunts. Right now, you have to sit out 14 days, non-residents do, until residents try to get the tag. What we see is the sale really happens in the first few hours for the residents. We're not talking weeks or days. It's really in the first hour or two. It's probably moving that to where we reduce the time period in which non-residents could get it, where it'd be maybe something like 5 or 7 days, but not the full 14. And then kind of just standardizing some of them across your Indians.
I like your idea, Stuart, on 21 and 23 late season. Being that I get to travel with Ralph and we get to talk a lot, right? Now, looking at unit 34, that late season over have you all looked at making that a draw hut? The 6-point pool?
Chairman, Commissioner Southwick, we have had some public comments on taking those APRE hunts and making them draw hunts in general. I think we could take that as a potential. We have very low success on some of those. GMU 12, for example, we had 0% success rate last year. It's a tough hunt to try to get a 6-point pool or better. So yes, we definitely could consider it. I think we could pass that out there and maybe create some other opportunities in different areas.
So, and that's where I'm coming from, just for opportunity for people that, hey, I put in for a hunt, knowing that it won't be very successful. The other one we've looked at, and we've called you, or I've talked to you, on that youth encouragement, there's 2,000 tags. So basically, I've looked, I was hoping we could, and I love youth, but I love senior citizens too. And so I've been looking at the 2,000 youth encouragement. If we can move 1,000 of those, leave 1,000 youth, and move 1,000 to senior citizen and/or mobility impaired. And because you're hearing people that can't go. We put in 65, in my opinion, senior citizen would be 65 and above. But, I don't know,
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Southwick, we could definitely put that out there for a public comment and go throughout the meetings and we can come back to you in August with what we get out of this.
Thank you. That's a good recommendation.
Back to Commissioner Solopek's comment on the late season. I really would like to see that in the draw, and not only as for goal, but if we're increasing the cow permits as well, in that unit, gosh, let's give more opportunity here. Currently, how many do we have? Like 75 that we're giving?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Ramos, you're specifically just for GMU 34?
Yes, 34, the late season, December hunt.
300 tags. 300 tags.
I think that's state.
That is 300.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Ramos, it's 200.
200 tags. Maybe even doubling that as an either sex opportunity in the draw. That would also help to give us a little more opportunity in the early hunts as well. That's just another option. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? We'll see you again when?
Mr. Chairman, it'll be in August.
We'll feel it. Okay. Agenda item number 15, initial discussion for potential rule changes on the private land elk license allocation system 19.30.5 and MAC.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, so the E+ rule is actually a permanent rule. Through time, we've seen some instances where we think that rule could be improved, and the application of the rule and some of the provisions within the rule, I think we see some changes that are necessary to make it a one, more biologically driven rule, and two, some issues that we do have occurred through time with the rule. The rule was first established in 2005. It replaced the previous loss system. And since that time, we've seen some things that have happened that we think really need some adjustments in it. One of the big things that we've seen in the rule, the current rule, it says in order to be a participating property plus you need to provide a meaningful benefit to elk. Well, it doesn't really define meaningful benefit to elk, and I can guarantee if we went around the room, everyone would have a different definition of what a meaningful benefit of elk is, whether it be a biologist, a general public member, a landowner, or whoever that be. And so that's created an issue of where we've enrolled properties differently throughout the state on saying, yes, you provide a benefit, no, you don't provide a benefit, who provides a benefit, what it is. And one of the big things we'd like to do in this new proposed rule change is really kind of define what meaningful benefit to elk is. And what we're proposing doing with that is we've developed some guidelines in the last 2 years on how we look at properties and how we allow properties to come into the system. Those guidelines are based off of what habitat needs do elk need in order to live throughout the year. Really, it's food, water, space, cover, and the surrounding area. And so those are the kind of guidelines we're now evaluating new entries into the program or people wanting to come into the program. And we get about 300 applications, between 300 to 350 applications annually of properties wanting to enroll into E+ inside the core. What we've used in the last 2 years is these guidelines is what's set and defining what meaningful benefit to elk is. It's limited the properties that really have come in. We only put in about 100 of those properties out of 350 each year. But it hasn't been, the biggest issue is it's not been done retroactively. And so there's properties within the state that were put in previously that maybe probably don't need meaningful benefit to elk. And we've gone through and looked at a lot of properties that are currently in, looked at how we've scored properties that are wanting to come in and looking at, okay, if we made these retroactive, went back through all the ranges that are in there. Within the core, right now, we have about 2,800 properties enrolled in E+. We think it'd be anywhere from, depending on which direction we get from the commission on where the minimum that have to come in to E+ would be removing 400, 450 to as many as 1,000 properties in the state that we don't feel are making meaningful benefit to elk. And I guess, how do we determine what meaningful benefit is? Again, we wanted to make it biologically founded. We want to make it simple and consistent so anyone can use it, anyone can understand it, and it can be applied across the statewide level. It's defensible is another big part of it, and it captures the intent of the rule. The intent of the rule is to enroll properties that make meaningful benefit to elk, and then allow authorizations to go to those properties. So, and also the last thing we wanted recordable, something where it stayed with the property so we knew what it was. What we did, like I said, we looked at for our habitat components. This is straight out of our guidelines that we kind of adopted. I don't want to go through each exact word of it, but really we score the criteria of the property based off of what components it has. And for it specifically, you can get a score of 1 to 3 or 0 to 3, depending what you are. If you're a rocky soil and creosote, you're getting a score of 0. If you're a substantial forage, grassy meadows, rock bottom areas, riparian areas, cool season grasses, warm season grasses, you're going to get a score of 3 because that's what elk really want. Same with water, different scoring systems for water, depending on what kind of water is on your property. Do you have no water available to elk use, or do you have permanent year-round water, which makes a big difference in terms of suitability or meaningfulness, I guess I'd say, to elk. Lastly, or not lastly, but one other component is the cover. Elk can need some kind of component of cover. They seek out some component of cover. Is there none on the property, or is there some kind of cover? It's not as important as food as water, so that's why you see the score of 0 to 2. But it still is an important component of biology. Another big thing is that are you surrounded by neighbors? Are you in a subdivision? Is a property in subdivision that like we have some properties currently enrolled? Or are you a key migration corridor in the middle of a forest? That's a piece of property that serves as that corridor. Lastly, there's a couple things that are big in the E+ system. We have quite a few properties that have agricultural areas within the property, whether it be irrigated crop fields or it be dryland crop. We want to recognize those landowners that are making that contribution to elk. So if you're in irrigated land, you have irrigated crop, you have elk coming into your hay meadow grazing in the middle of the night, and you're accepting of that and providing that nutritional benefit to elk, we want to recognize that. So it's an agricultural bonus. There's also instances that we can't think about that has some unique components to that property that maybe we would recognize just as a bonus. For example, maybe you're the one cabin area of that population. Losing that corridor, maybe for a migration for winter range, would be really detrimental to that population. So we have a bonus criteria. There's a potential of 13 points in the scoring of our guidelines. What we've been doing in terms of looking at new enrollments is saying you have to make a minimum score of 6 to get in under the new system. We're really looking at it from a perspective is, should it be 6, should it be 7? We don't really know. We're going to go and have meetings, and I do want to be upfront. I've met with a lot of interested constituents through this, whether it be cattle growers, guides and outfitters, backcountry hunters and anglers in the last couple of weeks, and you all. And we're really trying to figure out where should that score be. We will in the next month get with a lot of landowner groups, a lot of other groups, and try to figure out where we think the department's recommendation is on that. We're kind of split right now. We should be at 6, should it be at 7. One of the other things, and we discussed it in the elk rule previously, is really making those core boundaries biologically defensible. And that's how we determine tags or allocations that go inside the core is determined by what that core boundary is. The one thing we do know as we talk more and more about it, the definition of core is very confusing to people. Core outside the core. Really what it is, inside the core, or what we're saying maybe will be the primary elk management zone, is where the Game Commission sets the harvest limits. You all, through the elk rule, determine what we propose, what harvest we think we could have. You guys determine the license limits, and that's within the core. So really the core is those primary management zones where licenses are set by the commission. Outside of that, licenses aren't set by the commission. It's a ranch by ranch negotiation with the private landowners. That's the only difference between core and outside the core from a licensing standpoint. From a management standpoint, it's those areas where we're maybe managing for quality management, opportunity management, we're setting some kind of sustainable harvest. Outside of that, we're not. We have 3 areas that are highlighted in orange there right now that we're considering as special management zones. They're within what we consider primary elk habitat, primary elk range, where we want to continue to manage for sustainable elk populations, but they don't fit the model of E+. For example, GMU 55A does not fit the model of E+. There's very small portions of private or public land in there and large portions of private land. If we went through the E+ model right there, there would be no licenses going to the public land. And that is viable, the once in a lifetime elk unit. We still want to manage for sustainable elk populations. The proposal through the proposed changes in the elk rule is to basically do like we've been doing in those special management zones and allocate licenses on a range by range basis in those 3 management zones, those 55, 54, and potentially 46. Outside of those management zones and outside of the core, so some of the areas like 47 or 40, we have elk in 40 right now that occur every once in a while. We have to work with individual base landowners to set up an agreement to hunt with maybe 5 elk that come onto their property. We're proposing going over the counter with set season dates in those units. For example, we had elk show up in the Palencia Mountains in the desert this year. In order for that landowner to harvest those elk in the Palencia Mountains, we would have had to have an agreement with them, set license allocations to them, and then they would have to hunt. We're not trying to manage for elk in the Palencia Mountains on top of desert sheep. We want them to manage for desert sheep. So what we're proposing on those areas is have set season dates. It still would be only on their private deeded property, but have the set season dates on those areas. Inside the core would still work like we currently are proposing. Inside the core would still be an allocation of licenses. The core boundaries would grow in some of these areas, but it still would be a set of licenses. Some of the other issues that we see, again, like we discussed, the biggest issue we see is not having a definition of meaningful benefit and having properties that enroll that probably never should have been enrolled. I'll be the first to admit we have properties in the state of New Mexico that are 5 acres, that sit on a highway on the front and sit in a subdivision and have a junkyard in the back. Is it really providing a meaningful benefit for elk? No, but it's being weighted the same as every other small contributing ranch in the state. It's an allocation the same as those, and it's really not appropriate from an elk management standpoint. What we're planning on doing, again, like I said, is remove those properties, not making a meaningful contribution. One of the other big things that has happened through time, and one of the things we're proposing is, right now our small contributing ranches are, of those 2,900 properties in the core, 1,900 of them are considered small contributing ranches. And what I mean by small contributing ranches is they don't receive a full allocation. So their property, whatever percentage of their property or private land consists in that land, they get that many tags, that percentage of tags. If I get 0.9 tags, I didn't get a full allocation of an authorization, so I am a small contributing ranch. As that pool grows, the wait period till I get a tag, because the rule states now everyone else must get a tag before I get my full tag. Some of the GMUs, it's a 15-year wait out right now, where I might have 160 acres with a hay field in my backyard, and I have 100 elk coming in every night during the calving season, but I'm still competing the same as the person that I mentioned before, that was 5 acres that had a highway in the front. We want to change that. One of the big things we want to do with that is, like I said, in the score, you could get a score by up to 13. If we see minimum at 6 or 7, let's say if you set it at 6, I could have 7 points above the minimum. If I'm a 13 property, I'm 7 points above what the minimum is, weight my property by that. not by an acreage split. We weight it by how much more of a benefit I'm providing to the elk management of the state, and weight it, and I have a much more likelihood of drawing tags if I have a higher meaningful benefit to elk than other properties. Again, this would just occur for the small contributing ranches. The other thing we do is we have a The other thing we do in E plus is we have what we call unenrolled deeded properties. So there's unenrolled deeded acreage in every single portion of the GMU report. Just people don't sign up or some other reason why it's not there. We then take the licenses that are allocated to that. So we maybe 5% of the GMU is unenrolled deeded property, 5% of private land licenses go to that unenrolled. We then take those licenses and pass them back through the same formulas that we did on the base allocation. So large landowners, the largest landowners are getting those first. And so right now, our unconverted rate inside the core is about 27% across the state on an average of unconverted licenses. Our ranches that are greater than 10,000 acres have an unconverted rate of above 10,000 acres, and we're giving them more tags with the unenrolled deeded bonus. Our proposal is to take that bonus back through the small contributing ranches first, rather than the large guys first. Again, our small ranches are only going to be, if we make these proposed changes, would be those properties making meaningful contribution. We want to get it into the hands where they have people that are having 100 elk in their hay meadows in the middle of the night that are making a big difference for elk management, for elk in the state of New Mexico, and get them the allocations rather than waiting out 50. The other thing that we're seeing, what people are doing right now in E plus, is splitting properties because they see the wait time in the FCR. If I'm a 150 acre piece of property, I got my bull tag this year, what I'm going to do is split my property and I'll deed half the acreage to my wife. The way the rule reads right now is that new deed comes in, goes to the first of the line, and she might draw the 50. And the next bull tag on the 75 acres that I deeded. And then we see a split again to citizens. And so there's been that game being played a little bit. What our proposed recommendation is, any change in acreage, no matter what, if it's a growth or decrease or any kind of change at all, would be a reevaluation of that property under our new guidelines that we state. So, for example, if I was a 6 before, and because of water, I only had 100 acres, I split it in half, 50 acres of water's on one side and 50 on the other side is the better forage, maybe both those properties fall out with the new split. So it encourages people combining and not splitting. It discourages the split. And the other thing is we no longer want to retain the draw history, so we don't want to do this where everyone, all these small people have to wait out till everyone receives a bull tag, till I receive a bull tag again. We wanted to, again, weight the probability of you getting a bull tag based on how much of a benefit that property is making to you.
Would be year.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Ramos, that'd be correct. Every single year that they're going as the weighted. I think I went through all of those changes. And then, like I said, for what we currently call outside the core, what we're calling the secondary zone, what we'll probably change this to is those properties in the Palencia Mountains, those properties in the Middle Rio Grande where we have elk and chili fields, those properties that are down around Tucumcari that have elk in it. We don't want to go on an allocation, range by range allocation. Right now, outside the core, we have almost 40% of those licenses going, or more than 40% going unconverted every year. The reason they're going unconverted, and you hear a lot of it you've heard it from public meetings, is those are opportunities being lost. Well, they're really not opportunities being lost. What it is those are given to private land deeded only, but really why they're not being utilized is because elk didn't show up. So if elk didn't come into the Middle Rio Grande, and you had elk in GMU 14, the properties along the Middle Rio Grande, they have 15 authorizations waiting for them to come into their chili fields and waiting for them to come into their hay fields, and they didn't come in that year, they all go in the trash can unconverted. It wasn't a lost opportunity per se because the commission didn't set that as a license and rule. It was really the elk didn't show up on those properties. We don't think there's a need to really allocate those licenses. We want to have a hunting season throughout those areas, and when they shouldn't show up, if they're there during the hunting season, let's take advantage of harvest on it, not necessarily go to a range by range allocation. With that, I would take any questions.
Got a question. I recall that maybe by rule, regulation, the department is supposed to evaluate every ranch every year. Is that correct? Are we doing that?
Mr. Chairman, by rule, we're just supposed to evaluate for enrollment. And that's why we have some properties that are currently enrolled that probably aren't making meaningful benefit to elk. Again, it didn't really define what meaningful benefit to elk is. So you and I are probably gonna have a different definition on what meaningful benefit is.
I would probably defer to you.
And what happened through time, again, we're into almost 14 years of this rule, is people put in properties differently based on their interpretation of meaningful benefit. What this would do is tighten that down retroactively, go back through all the properties and define them all the same across.
So would we still be on an enrollment basis, or would we be on a yearly biannual? Because what may work on day one, on year 14 may not.
Mr. Chairman, so what the biggest thing we would do is put in a provision in rule that any changes to the property, any changes of an acreage or something like that would require a reevaluation of the property to continue enrollment in it. So if you sub-deed or subsection out part of your property, we see that, a landowner might have 5,000 acres, put 1,000 acres in as a subdivision. You're gonna get a new score on the subdivision. Right now, we just say, okay, reduce that property by 1,000 acres, they received that much, let's tax by a portion. We then go say, if you went and put it in the subdivision, it changes your scoring of the habitat. So
is it fair to say we do not have the personnel to check on these ranches every year?
Mr. Chairman, every single year without change would be almost
impossible. So on the start of enrollment, do we actually have an on-site review where somebody from the department goes and blesses it?
Mr. Chairman, the way we have been doing it like I said, we've been doing this with a new enrollments the last 2 years, because by policy, we determine what meaningful, or by rule, we determine what meaningful benefit is. We've evaluated almost 700 properties in the last 2 years for inclusion into the property. The first cut that we do is we bring a lot of our biologists in the room, the sergeants of the area in the room, and we take a quick look on Google Earth. We know what the surrounding area is. We'll bring in our survey data from the helicopters, look at that area and say, what is the initial cut on these scores? We then send out, if we have an issue that we can't determine, like a water source or something like that, we'll send a district officer out to double check that and say, what is going on there? When we determine, let's say you are at 5 because I cut off to 6, we send out to that landowner, you have not met the qualifications or minimums to make enrollment. We evaluated your property on this basis. Please, if you see any discrepancies in our evaluation, please get back to us. Of those, about 300 to 350 we've rejected. We hear from about 4. So we're pretty tight on our enrollments, and a lot of times they'll be, hey, you missed this one water source on a well that you can see that was behind this gate or behind this roof, you can see, and we'll re-put those in. So anytime we reject the enrollment on you didn't meet meaningful benefit, we also send a letter saying, please notify us of how we missed it.
What's the appeal process from the
So right now, and I didn't mention it yet, we do or will propose the change in the appeal process and rule. Appeal process and rule now is a landowner that wants to appeal it can have 3 members of the commission go onto a panel and look at it. We think there needs to be more checks and balances internally before it gets to the commission. So if a landowner, just like I stated on what we do with the rejection right now, we send a letter out saying, please, if you disagree with that, you go to
something like an internal board of appeal before it ever gets to
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. There would be an internal board of appeal, probably 2 levels before it ever comes to the commission. So by the time it comes to the commission, we'll have maybe a regional biologist look at it, or a district officer, maybe an assistant chief, a chief, and then moving on. If that is still an appeal, if there want no appeal, it will come in front of the full commission.
That's a better system than having us be the first cut.
Okay. So you've already been piloting this rubric that you shared with us?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Ramos, that is correct. So we've met with, I'm going to probably miss a group, but we've met with Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, Guides and Outfitters, cattle growers, Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, Wildlife Federation, many of you, and now there's one other group, but yes. And for the most part, it's very well received. I think that the biggest thing everyone recognizes is there is properties that we're putting there that are not making any. And we recognize it internally. A lot of people recognize it externally. And what we're trying to do is, one, solve that big issue.
So there'll be a reevaluation of all of the, sort of start with a clean slate then.
Mr. Chairman, yes, we'd start with a clean slate. So you all know we've already evaluated every single property internally under 40 acres. So we already know a lot of properties that are under that 6 that are still enrolled in the system, but we need to make a change to the rule before we can retroactively pull these properties out. We go back through in the ensuing months. This would take effect in April 1st of 2019. By April 1st of 2019, we would have evaluated every property in the state, back out to say, have you met the qualifications or not. Properties that are 40, 50,000 acres are going to have those habitat components. It's just going to, because we drew the core boundary around where core elk habitat is. So if you're in the core and you have 50,000 acres, you should have every single component. Where the properties can kind of fall out is about the 200 acres less is where you might be in the subdivision or you might not, but still within the core elk range.
On one of your slides, you had exceptions on a case-by-case basis. Tell me about that.
I think it was.
It was the slide before the question slide.
Okay.
Oops. So tell me what that means.
So what this is outside the core. These are those areas like the Paliseo Mountains, et cetera. Let's say, for example, we determined the hunting season to be archery September 1 through 24, rifle October 1st through November 30th. I'm not saying that's what we're going to propose, but if we went with that intersects, let's say elk showed up in the Paliseo Mountains in April. If we wanted to harvest that, we would do, that's where the exceptions come on a case-by-case basis. If that landowner came to us and said, I'd like to hunt outside or establish outside the core, we would look at it and say, look, we probably agree with you. If we could take care of this through a harvest rather than us having to go out on a depredation basis and take care of that, we prefer harvest. We don't want to have it taken advantage of, but we would do it on a case-by-case basis if we had elk show up. And so it wouldn't be a year-round hunting season, but if it's outside the scope of what was established, we want to work with those landowners.
So is this currently in place in some fashion?
Mr. Chairman, outside the core currently, we can hunt year round, but we have to negotiate with that landowner when their licenses are valid, how many they receive, for what months they receive them, et cetera. What we would do, all that negotiation would go away in outside the core. We won't need to even have that conversation, but if we have those issues, and we know which landowners those are, where they already are going to be, where we know we have a big concentration maybe on the spring green up area on the population every 4 years. Those exceptions we know and we work with those animals.
So you would approve that, director ultimately approves it. Is there any other level?
So Mr. Chairman, right now it's actually approved at the local level. We probably do something and we would be open for that on an exception on a case like that, like population management. It is a director approval. It's not necessarily concurrence with the chairman, but we would want to go back to that. Is on these case-by-case instances, we look at the biology, propose it through our district staff or through our regional biologists, and then ultimately have the director sign off on, yes, this is a case-by-case basis where we can cover should go out outside of the establishment.
Any other questions or comments?
I'd just like to make a comment. I really like what you've done here, Stuart. I think it levels the playing field. It makes it fair to the ones that are truly contributing and the ones that aren't. It's just way of life. So I think it's very good.
So let me, I know Garrett Lawson is not here, but I know one of the comments that he made frequently was, we have all these unused tags where private landowners may not put in. They go unused or something like that. I think what you said today addresses that concern. Tell me if I'm wrong or if I'm right.
No, Mr. Chairman, that's correct. So we actually met with Wildlife Federation yesterday. Garrett was unfortunately not there, but right now inside the core, we have an unconverted rate of 27% of tags. 27% of the tags are not being used. Those are lost opportunities. The commission set 100 bull tags, maybe on the private land, 27% are not being used. Again, I think our biggest reason why they're not being used is when we do that unenrolled candidate acreage, we pass it back to the big landowners that typically don't use it. Our proposed change is that for the small people that are making contributions, we'll still have probably somewhat of an unconverted rate. We'll probably be in the 10% range, we think. But also we have an unconverted, what you don't see or don't hear about, public draw tags have an unconverted rate as well. The license is sold, I'll call it unconverted 60%, so we should have X number of licenses. Well, we also factor into X number of public land hunters don't even go out on that hunt, so we could offer those many more hunts up the 4-year average of what people don't hunt. So we already take that into consideration. We're taking into consideration on the private land. We'll drop this unconverted rate drastically by issuing it to the people that will use it. The other drastic drop in unconverted rates is going to be outside that core area. Right now, outside the core is at 38% unconverted rate, or excuse me, 46% unconverted rate. So almost half the tax we issue outside the core. Again, it's a function of us not showing up. We have some GMUs where unconverted rates is high as 90%. Issuance of an authorization in those areas.
So let it not be said that I did not listen. He is Governor Garrett. All those signs he came in front of us and brought that up. So.
Stuart, and that's where that 51-49 ratio that they use, that they bring to us all the time, that's based on allocation and not converted, correct?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Ramos, that's correct. They can pool together inside the core and outside the core. So it's very different in terms of elk management again. And so that outside the core, that won't have unconverted rates anymore. It's going to be inside the core. We think that unconverted rate would drop to around 10%, maybe less than 10%. And in some GMUs, it's probably going to drop down to 0%.
So one more quick comment. So how long have you been in development on this? Because I know you and I visited about it a couple of years ago.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, we've been in development with different issues over probably 5, 6, 7, 8 years of different things that we thought I would work with where it's not working. In earnest development of it, I'll credit my staff and a lot of other members throughout the department. When they developed the guidelines 2 years ago on new enrollments, we saw that the issues of splitting properties. We saw how many new enrollments were coming in. The wait periods for a Voltag and Gila going from 10 years to 15 years just because of differences. We implemented those 2 years ago because by rule we could on new enrollment. So we, in earnest, about 2 years ago, really started looking hard at this.
And it shows. I appreciate your efforts.
I too want to say that there's a lot of work being done here, and I really appreciate it. We need to remember that the 400, 450 that will be taken out of the system, those tags will be able to be used for the small contributing ranchers. So if a rancher, say, has 100 acres within the forest.
On the depredation program, it encourages people not to build a fence. So it's a loss to us in terms of a wildlife management standpoint when we preclude forage to wildlife. It's a loss to the hundreds of we think by recognizing how much of a contribution we make to elk management across the state of New Mexico, regardless of what your land status looks like, we should really look at that and issue those private land licenses based on that fact.
Stuart, with that, is that last option going to be still available with a fencing?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Ramos, of course, by statute, we'll still deal with depredation. So no matter what, we're going to have a depredation program. If a landowner chooses that they prefer not to enroll in E+ and would rather go down the depredation standpoint, we'll definitely work with them and continue to do that.
I appreciate the fact that if we have a true depredation situation and that landowner has that much habitat that's contributing to the elk population, there's that many elk there, then their score would probably be very high and we need to be reevaluating that property. So I think it's going to reduce the number of depredation issues too.
Any other questions, comments? Now we're done patting you on the back, get back to work. So what the next step then is you will post a proposed farm, right?
So, Mr. Chairman, our next step is, we did a lot of legwork coming into this meeting. Our plan is in the next month is have some, like we did with Pronghorn, we'll invite all landowners to a meeting, probably 4 or 5 area meetings throughout there so we can explain what the proposal is. We'll also have public meetings for just general public meetings. We'll probably host anywhere from as few as 8 to as many as 10 meetings across the state in the next month. By August, we'll come back to you as our final recommendation based off of what we hear from the public.
So what I in addition, you may do this anyway, in addition to the normal notice you might give of those meetings, send something to the actual folks that have enrolled their properties, because
Mr. Chairman, that's what we did with A+. We'll do the same with that. We'll send a letter to all enrolled landowners.
I'm sure we haven't heard the end of it, but great work. I think this is many steps in the right direction. Let's take a quick break and then we'll pick up on 16. Agenda item number 16, initial discussion for potential rule changes on hunting and fishing manner and method rule 19.31.10 QMAC. Great.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, again, this is a discussion item, looking at removing the manner and method, language and rules from all the individual species and putting them into just one rule 3110, one section, where all manner and method would live under one rule instead of the individual species. While we're working on moving all those rules into one, look at trying to clarify anything that is confusing, simplify the language, or strengthen it if needed. In there, we will have an opportunity with some of the topics we've discussed in the past, like shed antlers and other things that we can address at that time in manner and method, if you so choose. As we're moving them and we put together a draft document, we'll be going around the state trying to get public input, meeting with any of the groups that want to discuss it with us, and we'll have a draft version of that manner and method to present to you in August, and hopefully a final version come November. So with that, I will take any questions.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, if I may, just very quickly, this is the first time in modern history of the department that we have actually overhauled the entire manner and method. And so I just want to extend my thanks to everybody. This has been a department-wide effort, along field operations with wildlife management, fisheries. INE have been working on this to move this forward. This will modernize manner and method, and I appreciate all the work that they have done to make this happen and bring it forward. There's still a lot to do, but the work's been tremendous, so thank you everybody who's worked on this.
Is this manner and method including fishing, or what we just talked about?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Southwick, it will include fishing.
Is there any way we can include the second rod instead of having to buy the second rod?
So, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Solopek, the second rod is actually a statutory fee. Yes, so that would be a legislative action to remove that.
I still think it's steady.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Solopek, that is one of the tasks that the director set forth with us, is to look through all of that rule, and if there is anything that we would determine as petty or unnecessary, if it's not affecting the resource, why do we have it? And we're going to try to address that and bring you something that you can live with.
And, if we could ever get that changed, however, if there's waters that are only one rod, that's not a problem. You can't fish with two rods. But if we could fish with two rods, the waters that we could fish with two rods, I don't see why we have to buy license, and I get it. Anyway.
How many pages is this going to take up?
Mr. Chairman, the manner and method is going to probably be close to 20 pages long. It's going to be a significant rule.
Get it out there early. It's 20 pages. That's a lot to digest. So get it out there as early as possible for people to take a look at it. All different interest groups, Harry Romero, Wildlife Federation, make sure to take a look at it with your outfits, because it's a big deal. As the director pointed out, first time in our lifetimes maybe that we've taken a look at it. So let's try to get it right. Since you're trying to pull together all the threads, I would suggest some lawyer somewhere take a look at it to make sure that it's consistent, because over 20 pages, it is sometimes hard to make sure it's consistent. So proofread. It's easier to put it back out in front of us to fix it. So let's try and get it right the first time. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Bobby, are you somewhere going to embed also the trail camera SD cards versus like satellite and cellular technology that we're seeing now, and kind of looking at the fair chase behind that.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Ramos, that would be something that we would have to discuss and develop. It is not currently in there, as we've been developing. But we can have that discussion to see how we would want to come forward with something like that.
I would like to see it just based on last time we discussed it. It was basically, do we want trail cams or not? It wasn't SD card driven where, you know, people need to do their homework and going out there versus the satellite cellular. Boom, I just got a picture and let's go and hunt. And to me, that's not fair chase. So I'd like to definitely see that embedded in there somewhere.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Ramos, yeah, without a doubt, I can draft some language to have that discussion. I wasn't completely aware that we wanted to go that direction, but we can definitely put some language together and then put it out there for you all and NGOs to look at.
And the reason why I bring it, I think that is a manner and method of taking game that's happening out there.
Sure.
And I'd also like to see that also, I mean, we're the first state, I believe, to outlaw drones, so I mean, that in my opinion kind of fits in the same thing.
Any other questions? I wonder, Commissioner Ramos and Salpec, do we want those kind of things in the rule, or do we want those as a regulation that can be looked at and changed within a 3 or 4 year period? Just a question.
Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair Montoya, these would be regs that would be on the cycle. Yeah, we're gonna have to look at it and keep in mind that, as we move forward with the rule in its entirety, we're gonna want something that we can get as much addressed as we can because if there's a piece in there that isn't effective or light, it affects the whole rule because it's going to be the entire rule. So we're gonna have to work pretty tirelessly with this initial draft to come up with something pretty solid by August that we can start moving forward with. So there's going to be lots of discussion yet to be had.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, and just one last comment, and I know that I know we come up with all these policies and regs, and of course our officers out in the field have to monitor that and provide citations, but hopefully that you all are also dissecting things in there that, like the San Juan shuffle for fishing. You know, if somebody's out there fishing, fly fishing, they shuffle their fish and they get caught doing that, they can be cited for that currently with our current rule. Is that correct, sir?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Ramos, that is correct. That's going to be part of those discussions as we're moving forward to address impact to the resource. Whatever social issues are out there, and like I said, try and move forward, but working with the other groups to see where that line lies, to bring a good product forward, because we're going to have to weigh it all, without a doubt.
Right, and I hate to keep adding, but also like hunting with air gun arrows. You know, that type of technology that's really just looking at the fair chase, definitely not during an archery hunt, and that's just my opinion. But on the other hand, why not during a rifle firearm season? So just manner, method, my concerns, and a lot of work for you all to do.
Right now, just with all the various species rules, we're trying to ensure that we've incorporated everything that is there currently. First and foremost, because we don't want to leave something out. So making sure that we address every rule that's out there right now. And then through these discussions, if there's this additional stuff that we want to address, that would be a good time. But right now, it's making sure we've got everything that makes us effective today, that we still have at least that tomorrow.
Anything else? For now, we only get a big job. So we'll see this, an actual draft in August. Agenda item number 17, proposed regulations to define terms and phrases and amend and add enforcement mechanisms and penalties under criminal trespass. Any members of the public have any comment? This was in part to, got nothing over there? It's in part to give the public the opportunity to weigh in on some of these implementation issues with all the various statutes and rules and regs. So we instituted, was it 6 months, a year ago, landowner contacts. We get a spreadsheet or a PDF of those contacts on a monthly or weekly basis.
It's on a
weekly basis. And that's been helpful to see kind of the universe of what's going on out there. Without benefit of the public here to speak on some of these issues, this agenda item loses some of its impact, but let me ask a couple of hypotheticals just under the various laws, rules, and things that we've got. If you have a landowner who has posted notices of no trespassing, and presumably done it the right way, and they're not all shot up, and you can see no trespassing, no hunting or fishing or something like that. How does how do you implement that when you get a call from a landowner saying, look, I've got a hunter that's carrying a rifle, is trespassing on my property? So run down the various scenarios and how that shakes out from your perspective.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, when we receive those calls, the first thing our officers do is as soon as possible, they head that way. Trespass has always been one of our top priority calls that we respond to. And initially, the primary focus is going to be on finding that individual, that trespasser, so we can talk with him or identify that individual. Unfortunately, oftentimes, by the time you get there, they're gone. There may not be a description, but that's the primary is to find that individual. If we can find that individual or not, the next is going to be to talk with the witnesses or the landowner. And at that point, we look at the property to see, is it legally posted against criminal trespass? Because that's very significant in showing that knowingly by it being posted properly. If it is posted properly, the next question typically is to the landowner is, do you want to move forward with criminal trespass charges? Because we're going to need those individuals when it goes through the court process to testify that I did not give this individual permission and I want to continue forward in the process. So that's typically how those go. When we get that report and there is legally posted.
So criminal trespass is under Title 30.
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. 30-14.
So under Title 17-4-6, we've got a misdemeanor portion of that, Section B. So let's say the landowner doesn't go into the criminal part of it, criminal trespass under Title 30, how would you proceed under Title 17, which is more under our jurisdiction, so to speak?
In my career, because of the posting requirements for 17-4-6, being posted in English and Spanish, been in general circulation for 2 weeks, I'm not aware of any properties that have gone through that. So that's usually where we fall short. And we've always leaned on Chapter 30 criminal trespass far before Chapter 17, just because it's a better written law. It's understood across the state and with the district attorney's offices. So we've always gone that route. But we do have rule undermanagement method that we often fall on when we have those properties that, whether they're posted correctly or we can show knowingly, even in times where they're not posted correctly. If you get the yellow Walmart sign that says no hunting, no trespassing, it's not a legal sign in terms of being 12 by 12. But we have a regulation that's knowingly hunting on private property without written permission, and we'll often go that route.
So if landowner got it right under 17-4-6, did what they're supposed to do, there's no impediment then for your officers to cite under that particular statute?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I suppose we could cite under that.
But you haven't seen one yet?
I haven't seen one, and again, we've always leaned on criminal trespass because it's a little better written statute, and it's got a little more teeth into it when it comes to our hunting, fishing, or trapping violations, with the implications to revocation.
So under section B of 17-4-6, it's a misdemeanor. So what would that translate into in terms of hunting and fishing privileges if they were convicted? What's the typical penalty for that?
Mr. Chairman, currently, criminally, they're facing a fine of $0 to $1,000 and indefinite term in jail, which they will obviously not get. But that violation specifically would just be a 5-point violation compared to a 20-point violation under criminal trespass.
So a 5-point violation gets you what?
Just the 5 points that you carry for the next 3 years. There would be no revocation or suspension that would go along with that.
And so that 5 points, that's by our rule regulation. We set it at 5.
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. And that's just, again, there's often rules that we don't use, and we did this the last time that we worked through the revocation rule. Just over the years, we had other violations that we were seeing consistently that were 5-point violations just because they fell into the catch-all category. So we gave them specific point values at that point.
So, Colonel Griego, you've been in law enforcement a long time. Sounds like Chapter 17 is not a tool in your law enforcement's toolbox to deal with trespassers right now, that you're really just going under Chapter 30 to deal with trespassers.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Ryan, that is correct. We typically always try to go the criminal trespass route, or if we do use Chapter 17, we typically will use Statute 1727 with the regulation of hunting on private without written permission.
Okay, so there are specific guidelines like publication and so forth under Chapter 17. And I'm trying to see what the real impediment is. You said they're written so differently. To using Chapter 17, what would you, if you could just sit down with a red pen and redraft that Chapter 17 rule, what is a big impediment for law enforcement being able to use it properly, use it more efficiently? I mean, if you had your druthers, how would you like to see that changed? Is it that landowners aren't going through that process of publication, or is it something on your side that it's really hard to have a certain element that's ever met?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Ryan, the issue with 1746 is some of the language in it. It's dealing primarily with propagation and hunting specifically, whereas criminal trespass, although we typically 90% of the time are dealing with our sportsmen when we respond to it, but it could be for any reason. We don't have to prove that individual was hunting under criminal trespass. If we can, and it's in connection with it, there's other implications by the statute. It's just it's accepted across the state as the standard when it comes to criminal trespass. And under 17, being written in English and Spanish and under propagation, I think it leaves holes in an argument when we're trying to prosecute something in court, where criminal trespass 3014-1 is very specific and very well understood. So it's easier to prosecute case. You have to have a good case, but the judges understand that. They do not understand. They don't see Chapter 17, and they definitely don't see Chapter 17 in the 17.4 section. We just don't utilize that very often. Like I said, I've never used it in my 21 years. So you run into that in the courts also.
So it seems like from what you said, there's two. There's one is disproving the element of hunting and fishing, and two is that that landowners aren't taking the initiative to go through that process that's set forth there.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Ryan, they're not taking that initiative because in their mind that's unnecessary. They take the initiative to post properly under criminal trespass, Chapter 30 versus Chapter 17, and go through those requirements. The vast majority, or not all private, or if not all private landowners, when they think of protecting their property against trespass, they think of Chapter 30 criminal trespass and the posting requirements under 3014-6. That's what they understand, and that's what they go. That's what the district attorney's office is gonna lean towards, and that's the standard that for prosecution.
Well, the public comment that we've been getting over the past few years from the landowners is not just general people walking out, for a jaunt on their property. They are really coming after public hunters. And public hunters are getting a bad name among the private land community. And I hate that. I'm a public hunter. I don't want that label. And so the reason I'm digging into this is because it's people out there, it's the public hunters who aren't abiding by the rules, that are out there with a license, but are trespassing. And so, I know one of the first things y'all do when you check someone is ask for their license. And if they have their license, obviously you'll be able to check off that box that they're hunting or fishing and place them under the Chapter 17. What I don't like is that Chapter 17 to me doesn't have much teeth to it, as being a misdemeanor and only having 5 points on the revocation scale. I think I would like to personally see that be a 20-point violation under Chapter 17. If the beef with private landowners is that people are out there trying to hunt or fish on their private property without permission, and that's exactly what Chapter 17 is supposed to be protecting from. I do believe that there are a lot of landowners that are not taking the initiative they need to post their property. But I do understand some situations we have in the state, especially in southeastern New Mexico, where it took me a while to understand this, but it's not so much posting the property on the outer boundary of the ranch. It's posting the property between state or BLM lands and the private property. And, their cattle graze, don't know those boundaries. There are no fences. And so it's posting along those boundaries and trespassing along those boundaries that become a big problem for a landowner. And so that posting requirement, that's what we're hearing so much public comment about. And so I'm wondering, the impediments that are in Chapter 17, if those definitions were redefined in a way to make it easier for a landowner to just, without a fence and without a sign, every so 100 feet in those areas, be able to still, when you come out, meet that knowing requirement, because it's like you said, you're needing it to be properly posted to go under Chapter 30. So I'm just looking at some creative ways. I do understand that the answer is, well, in my career, we just never go under 17. And what I'd like to say is that that is the real answer, and I appreciate your honesty, but that doesn't mean that that has to remain that way. And it doesn't mean that we can't look at least evaluate, maybe we can't, but evaluate whether we can make 17 a usable tool for you guys, because there is no harm in giving law enforcement more tools in their toolbox to do what you need to do out there. And it sounds to me like y'all have been limited forever on what you can do, and I'd like to know what can we do to help you be able to prosecute and take these people who are giving us a bad name, and deal with them in the courts.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Ryan, when I say we don't use chapter 17, what I mean is we don't use chapter or the statute 1746. We do use chapter 17 in many instances of hunting on private without written permission. We use that often. We probably use that more often than criminal trespass because of posting requirements.
And what's the point violation on that one?
That one, I'm thinking, is 20 points for hunting on private without written permission. I'm pretty certain.
Okay.
We've addressed that one. It, even under 1746, it's still a statute and will take legislative action for us to change any requirement in there. And I believe you're absolutely correct in that it's not the exterior boundary of these ranches that's typically the problem. It is these pastures, large pastures, 30, 40, 60 section pastures, where it's intermixed with public and private land. And you're absolutely correct in that a sign every 500 feet is just not going to occur. But that's where we come in and use hunting on private without written permission. If we can show that knowing they have the GPS with the land status on it, we have to build that case. It's not just simply them being there.
Which section is without written permission?
It's going to be in 30.10.
Right.
30.10, I'll give you that. It's going to be, I'm sorry, 31.10, 18, C.
I'll can't prepare. Thank you.
So in the hypothetical that the chairman gave you earlier, that either called, maybe it's posted properly on the outer boundary, but not these inner boundaries are not posted properly. Your choice is to, if you can find them, you give them a warning. If they come back, you can do something about it, right? Or
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Ryan, if it is properly posted, then we can go forward with prosecution. If the exterior is posted correctly, they're good. It's where you get a county road into a pasture where they can legally gain access. But that's where we would use, again, 1727 with under manner method hunting on private without written permission is where we typically go. Yes, without a doubt, we've had a few cases where the property was not posted correctly. And whether it be the district attorney's office not willing to take the case or the judge dismissing it, we've had that without a doubt. But under that rule, that is the way we handle that unposted, hard to post segments. But we just got to show that no one will get that.
17-2-7.
1727 this one. Basically, it just states that except as allowed by regulation, it's unlawful to hunt, fish. So that's what we tie our rules and regulations that you all pass. We tie it to that statute when we sign it. So you'll see 1727 on a lot of our violations, whether it's killing out of season, shooting from the road, it'll be 1727 with that regulation tied to it.
And that's the 20, and there's 20 points there, you think?
Commissioner Ryan, that was correct.
So let me go back to my original hypothetical. Person's got a rifle. They're on private land, let's assume it's been posted the correct way. But we're the fifth largest state by land mass, and your guys can't be there to physically witness that trespass. So let's say the landowner gets their cell phone out, takes a picture, gets a license plate, has a description of the person, maybe even visited with them. Visited is probably too nice a term for locking it down, but they could identify the person for you if they saw that person again. Can you make out a case, or having done that in the past, where a citation is issued under those circumstances?
Mr. Chairman, absolutely, we can go forward with the charge. It would be a criminal complaint at that point, and that landowner would absolutely be necessary in the prosecution of the witness to identify that individual in court. And then it would be our job to show that we interviewed the individual and the property was legally posted, and then we would absolutely move forward. That's probably the more often scenario than any other.
So maybe Commissioner Ryan can help me out on this. I mean, we have ranchers in your part of the world that seem to complain about serial trespassers. I don't know if it's the same person or different people repeatedly doing this. I mean, is that consistent with what you've heard from ranchers or landowners, that they're having this problem, but we're not getting to the citation phase of this?
Yes, or if we are, they don't know about it. They don't think we are. And so I know I do want to recognize that the department has been doing a lot over the past year to communicate that. And our landowner contacts and the initiative you guys have been taking have been helping with that issue, just communicating the follow-up on some of those calls.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Ryan, I will say that a lot of these where you all are hearing about, where they're saying, nothing is happening, they did nothing. I would venture the vast majority of the time, because there was no violation. They were on state land, they were on a road on state land, they were on BLM land. They were on that individual's leased ranch, but they were on the public land portion or state land portion. We do not, if the elements are there and the landowner is willing to move forward, we will always pursue charges. Without a doubt, there are times where the elements are not there, whether it's a posting issue, whether we can prove who was there. Sometimes it's just, I saw a white truck, and we can't find that specific white truck. So nothing goes on there. There are times where the individual probably was legitimately trespassing, but there was no identification, no vehicle description, there was tire tracks or boot prints, and we don't make that case. And I think we are getting better with talking with cattle growers, but in my 21 years, and I'm sure in the director's 25, will tell you that criminal trespass has always been one of our top priority calls. My whole area, it's always been one of those. It's an important one to us. Now there's other issues with, oftentimes when you call the sheriff, you call dispatch, you call the sheriff's office. When you call your local game warden, you typically call his cell phone. Well, he doesn't have cell phone coverage, so when he goes home that evening and hits the highway, boom, pops up the voicemail, and it's Joe landowner, hey, I've got a guy trespassing on me from 7:30 this morning.
So that's a good transition into county law enforcement. again, we're a big state. And so counties are typically closer to the problem, if you will, than our law enforcement is. And so it's a rhetorical question, but why aren't landowners going to their, because I think it's not a jurisdictional issue. I think any law enforcement officer can enforce Title 30. Why are they not getting what they need out of county law enforcement? Or is it just a simple fact that it looks like somebody's hunting and so they pick up and call us instead of county? What's your sense of that?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, without a doubt, there are times or landowners that will call the game warden because it looks like a hunter. But they often do call the county sheriff's departments to respond to these. I spent a lot of my career in Catron County, and the sheriff's department responded to a lot of criminal trespass calls. Now that we're dispatched through DPS, state police is getting a lot of these calls because they would have normally been directed to us, but it comes over the radio, and it's some of those. But without a doubt, in the rural communities, for sure, the sheriff's department responds to a lot of criminal trespass calls. Some of their stats are misleading that, you'll see if you run it, Chaves County probably has 7 or 8, 10 trespass calls a day. Well, what the underlying is, 9 of those were at Walmart. They weren't out in the field. But we do work well with our sheriff's departments around. That's one of the first relationships that our officers make is with the sheriff's departments and state police. So they are responding to those as well. So yeah, they do.
Yes, sir.
Since this issue came to the forefront, I'm carrying a tape measure with me. And many signs are not 144 inches. This county has some big ranches, they're not 144 inches. Otherwise, they meet the requirements. So if your officer is on that ranch and sees that the signs do not meet the requirement of Chapter 30, then they fall back to immediately Chapter 17.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Rick was absolutely, because we would still use those signs to help prove our knowingly, even though they're not statutorily legitimate for criminal trespass. We would use that as evidence in our knowingly and go with Chapter 17 and knowingly hunting on private without written permission.
And then to clarify for me, I heard 5 point violations and I also heard 20 point, which is good.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Rickles, hunting on private property without written permission under manner and method is a 20-point violation. 17.46, hosting requirements and for propagation, and that we also have the navigability language under, is a 5-point, and it's not because we view it as not important. It's just one of those that honestly has fallen under the radar. We do not use that statute, so we've not addressed it specifically with a 20-point value, which I agree as we're going forward with this, that's one of those that we need to address as probably 20 points as well.
Well, it makes sense to me since the legislature told us that we had to revoke licenses if they've got a criminal trespass. Well, I think it should be a 20-point violation for sure. So we can revoke licenses if they're hunting and fishing without written permission.
Many options. Probably should have been coalesced under one. Kept it simple, but it's not. Commissioner Ryan, anything else on this one?
No, I'd like to see, further discussion, and I'd like to definitely address, like you said, getting getting it to be a 20-point violation rather than 5-point.
That would be under 17.4-6. So can we get something out of your shop to at least do that amendment?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, we can do that. We would have to open the revocation rule to give it that, but that's how easy it would be, is just listing that. And I'm going off the cuff saying it's 5 points. My guys could have done something fantastic and thought of this, and it could be 20 points. I believe it's a 5 point.
We'll check on it. If it's not 20, this isn't a test. So, I know I couldn't pass this test. So if it's not, let's at least get that opened up and make it a 20. So it's consistent with whatever else we've got going on.
I think I have some disappointment that there's not more public participation in this discussion, because that's why it's on the agenda, is to give those landowners a voice to actually talk about it. So I don't know if it's the location of this meeting or what, but.
I am surprised. I mean, we've heard this issue pop up in public comment, even in other subjects that are tangentially related to this. So it's not seen on, even in this part of the state where there are certainly a lot of ranchers and landowners, to not have anyone here is unusual. But we may very well pick this up in August. And the answer is?
I was halfway right. 17.4685, on private property without written permission is just a 10-point violation. So that will address those.
Let's up that.
So I'd say let's at least get it on the table to bump it up to 20. So I think what I'll do is visit with you and the director further about, because some of this is implementation and how either the law or the regs are interpreted or implemented as much as it is policy decisions. Part of it up and running. So hopefully in August, we can see that. Should be enough time. Any other questions or comments?
Thank you. There's a lot of questions and hypotheticals. Thank you very much.
This won't be the last time we hear this, whether it's formally or in public comment, I suspect, but we'll talk about it further. I appreciate your efforts. Thank you. Not that I don't like you two guys, but there's nothing you can add to it right now. We did move up public comment to the next agenda item. Kirk Kennedy. So you don't have to stick around.
I was going to waive my comment, but after you said there wasn't a public comment.
No, you're
going to give that.
You're the only one.
I appreciate this meeting. I haven't been for a long time. I used to go a lot. And my perception was that maybe you had everything against landowners, outfitters, and some of that. And I appreciate your comments today. A lot of it. It put me a little more at ease. Your 20-point violation for trespass, I like that part of it, but it seems like we have 20 points. I'm an outfitter also and deal with landowners. It seems to me like part of that goes back to the revocations of licenses. I think you're getting yourself into a problem in some cases because there's going to be everybody going to court. Because of, on the outfitter side of it, losing licenses, and guys losing licenses, I don't think that there's going to be any correspondence with game owners anymore. just the regular, Mr. Ramos had a comment about that discretion and visiting with the game warden, but if you say anything to him anymore, in my opinion, I'm gonna direct my guys to say nothing, no correspondence with game wardens. And we will go to court. It costs me a lot, it costs the state a lot. And that discretion that you talked about, it doesn't seem like we're having. Accidents happen even on your trespass. If you happen to be 10 feet on the wrong side of the ground, I hate trespassers. But there is going to be some cases, and I'm sure the department can say that, the guy didn't know where that ground is intermingled and that type of thing. But I was really coming up here, I was going to waive my deal, but appreciate what I heard today. A lot of what I heard today.
Thank you. All right, let's do some rulemaking. See how badly I can fumble this through my script today. Back to the Stewart violation.
You have an agent.
Is that agent?
Public rule hearing. Hearing item number 1A, this is an informational report. Rulemaking hearing on final rule changes on the Turkey Rule 19.31.16 NAAC for the 2019-2023 hunting seasons. Yeah, give me a moment to collect my thoughts here while I want you to forget. Butcher this. This hearing will please come to order. My name is Paul Hensel. I'm the chairman of the State Game Commission. I will be serving as the hearing officer and be advised by the Commission's counsel from the Office of the Attorney General. The purpose of this hearing is for consideration of the Commission by the Commission for the final adoption following proposed rules. I'm going to do both of these together in this time. Splitting them up. First hearing item is for the Commission to receive public comments on the Turkey Rule, Title 19, Chapter 31, Part 16 of the New Mexico Administrative Code, which will become effective April 1, 2019. The current Turkey Rule is set to expire on March 31, 2019. Second hearing item is for the Commission to receive public comment on proposed new migratory bird rule, Title 19, Chapter 31, Part 6 of the New Mexico Administrative Code, which will become effective on September 1, 2018. Current migratory bird rule has expired March 31, 2018. This hearing is being conducted in accordance with the provisions of the Game and Fish Act and the State Rules Act. The hearing is being audio tape recorded. Anyone interested in a copy of the audio tape should contact Sandra, raising her hand, with the Game and Fish State Game Commission rather than the Game and Fish Commission. Public notice of this hearing was advertised in the New Mexico Register, the Albuquerque Journal, and the San Fe New Mexican, the New Mexico Sunshine Portal, and on the department's website. Copies of the proposed new rules have been available on the department's website and at the department office. Those here today, if you're going to speak, do we have any comment cards on this? Any of these? Kelly? No? Those here today, please, wishing to speak on this, please sign the attendance sheet at the back of the room, which will later be entered into the record as an exhibit. This rule hearing will be conducted in the following manner. Staff will present pre-filed exhibits. Exhibits admitted into evidence are available for review by the public, but exhibits may not be removed from this room. After all exhibits are entered, we will proceed to the presentation of the proposed rule, after which testimony will be taken from the audience. We don't really have an audience today. In order to ensure that the hearing is accurately recorded, only one person at a time shall be allowed to speak. A person recognized to speak is asked to identify themselves by name, who they are affiliated with for the record each time you are recognized to speak, and speak loud and clearly so the recorder can accurately record your comments. After a person has offered comment, they will stand for questions from the hearing officer and other commissioners. The audience may also ask questions of anyone offering comments after being recognized by the hearing officer. This hearing is not subject to judicial rules of evidence. However, in the interest of efficiency, I reserve the right to eliminate testimony deemed irrelevant, redundant, or unduly repetitious. The Commission may discuss the proposed rules after the public comment portion of the hearing. Final Commission action, including adoption of the rules, may occur after the conclusion of the presentation of the public comment period of the hearing. Let's see. We'll do the two informational parts, and then we'll close it. Get to it. So item number 1, rulemaking hearing on Turkey Rule 19.31.6 NMAC for the, 16 NMAC for the 2019-2023 seasons. This hearing is now open. Are there any exhibits for proposed new part in Rule 20-19.31.16 for the record?
Mr. Chairman, there are 6 exhibits. Exhibit 1, the notice of the rulemaking. Exhibit 2, the initial proposed rule. Exhibit 3, the presentation being given to the Commission today. Exhibit 4, the summary of the proposed changes. Exhibit 5, the technical information that we relied upon to build the rule. And exhibit 6, which is the 13 public comments received as the close of the public comments.
Sprinkle holy water on those there. Exhibits 1 through 6. Stuart, could you please introduce the proposed new rule for 19.31.16?
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, as we've discussed at the previous 2 Commission meetings, the Turkey Rule, main things are adjusting the youth seasons for the calendar day shifts, adding an additional youth draw in GMU 30, opening additional areas for spring turkey hunting, and also additional areas for fall turkey hunting. We received 13 public comments. We held 3 public meetings, one in Farmington, Las Cruces, and Albuquerque, and most of the comments were looking for additional hunting opportunities and also in agreement. Again, the rule will create a spring youth hunt on the Washington Ranch in GMU 30. It'd be 1 weekend during the regular youth season and up to 10 tags. We'd increase the number of tags in GMU 8 from 10 to 15. And we'd open additional areas for spring turkey, such as GMU 2B, 33, and 50. We'd also open all WMAs except for the following list of WMAs for spring turkey. Additionally, we'd open fall areas for turkey, such as 2B, 4, 5A, 39, 51, and 52, and all WMAs except for the following list. With that, I'll take any questions.
No public comment, correct? Still no public comment, okay. Any questions from commissioners, comments? Yes, sir.
I noticed, Stuart, that you removed all the language for manner and method in preparation for that previous.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Ratcliffe, that is correct. So we were removing all manner and method from all the species rules, put in the one rule that you will see later this summer.
Any other questions or comments? Are there any other exhibits anyone wants to enter into the record at this time?
Mr. Chairman, we actually do need to enter into exhibit number 7, which is the signature sheet for comments, reflecting that no comments have been made.
Totally blank. Okay, exhibit 7 is admitted into the record as well. So we're going to hold off on voting on this one. Let's roll up since these 2 are fairly. We'll roll them up together. Hearing item number 2, the informational portion rulemaking hearing on final rule changes on the migratory bird rule 19.31.6 and NMAC for the 2018-2019 seasons. I'm pleased we're getting to this early instead of late. This hearing is now open. Are there any exhibits for proposed amendments to rule 19.31.6 for the record?
Mr. Chairman, we'd like to enter 6 exhibits. Exhibit 1, the notice of the rulemaking. Exhibit 2, the initial proposed rule. Exhibit 3, the presentation being presented today. Exhibit 4, the summary of the proposed changes. Exhibit 5, the technical information we relied upon to develop the rule. And Exhibit 6, the 15 public comments received at the close of the comment period.
Exhibits 1 through 6 are admitted into the record. Would you please introduce the proposed new rule for 19.41.6?
Mr. Chairman, as we've gone through in the previous two meetings, we adjust the rule annually based on federal frameworks set by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Those federal frameworks were published in June of 2018, so this rule will correspond with the final end of the year to take advantage of later migratory birds, change the regular season dates according to the federal frameworks, and luckily this year we were able to receive an increase in our pintail bag limit from 1 to 2 based on the federal frameworks. Real quick, we received 15 public comments on this rule for the making, 3 public meetings. Really, most of it was things out of the control of the department and goes back to the federal frameworks, and we rely that back to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service every year on it. Some of it would like to see some later duck season hunts and dates. By federal law, we must close the last Sunday of January by hunting, so we will work with the federal government. There is a bill in Congress right now to maybe make it to where it goes a little bit later, so it almost takes congressional action to change hunting seasons for waterfowl. So just so you guys know, it's not as easy as the past. Real briefly, just these are the hunting dates that are proposed and that were set forth in the Federal Register and approved by the federal law that will coincide on our hunt dates in New Mexico for goose, duck, and central flyway, and our sandhill crane allocation. We were under allocation last year, so we were able to up some of our hunts. Our Middle Rio Grande Valley, we have to report the actual take of individual birds. This season structure shall allow will take it set by the federal government. Pacific Flyway, these were the dates that were set forth in the Federal Register as well. This will correspond in our rule and adopted today. Taking questions.
There's no public comment. Any questions or comments from the commission?
I noticed manner and method is in this rule. Is that a federal requirement?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Ricketts, the reason manner and method is in that rule is the season starts September 1st. The commission will not have approved a new manner and method rule before this rule has to take effect. So that's why next year when we open this rule, we'll propose removing manner and method.
Any other questions or comments? Any other exhibits anyone wants to enter into the record at this time? Number 7, which is the blank sign-in sheet. Exhibit 7 is admitted into the record. Anything further? Everyone present, sign the attendance sheet. Yes, no. If you haven't signed it, speak up now. At this time, the attendance sheets, they've already been marked as Exhibit 7 for both hearings. Comments submitted and testimony heard during this rule hearing will be reviewed by the commission and discussed during open session of today's meeting. The commission will vote on the proposed rules at that time. Thank you for being here. Let the record show that this rule-making hearing is adjourned at 12:40. Moving on to the action item portion of this, can I get a motion on item 1A, please?
Chairman, I move to adopt the proposed changes to 19.31.16 in MAC as presented by the department and allow the department to make minor corrections to comply with filing this rule with state records and archives.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Can I get a motion on item 2A?
Chairman, I move to repeal replace 19.31.6 in MAC as presented by the department and allow the department to make minor corrections to comply with filing this rule with state records and archives.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Opposed. Okay. We're off the hook. Can I get a motion to go into executive session? Let me just gotta read the word.
Mr. Chairman, I move to adjourn into executive session close to the public pursuant to section 1015(1)(h)(2) NMSA 1978 to discuss limited personnel threatened or pending litigation, in which the commission and/or department is or may become participant as listed in agenda on. Second. Roll call vote.
Commissioner Peterson?
Yes.
Commissioner Ramos?
Yes.
Commissioner Rickles?
Yes.
Commissioner Ryan?
Yes.
Commissioner Solomon?
Yes.
Chairman Montoya?
Yes.
Chairman Kimball?
Yes.
So for the purposes of this executive session, everybody will need to leave this room. Ross, please make sure the recording is off and the video is stopped.